Chapter 161. Chapter 160 Thump. Here are all the documents needed for establishing a guild. That's a lot. Suho chuckled dryly, looking at the mountain of documents piled in front of him. As if he had anticipated Suho's reaction, Yu Jinho grinned and picked up the topmost stack of papers, explaining, "Of course there are many documents. The guild you're establishing will be treated as a large one right from the start." Is it because of the Scavenger Guild? Yes. The Scavenger Guild has already started selling the spring water of the Echo Forest, and half of that profit will go directly to your guild. How could there be fewer documents? Suho nodded at Yu Jinho's words. Item spring water of the Echo Forest. The antidote potion obtained from the Ice Elves in the Glacier Dungeon had its effectiveness proven through various tests done by the Scavenger Guild. Suho already knew its effects very well because he had seen the item description. However, to sell it to other hunters, such verification procedures were necessary, even if they were somewhat cumbersome. Once its value as an antidote potion was confirmed, the Scavenger Guild immediately launched their new product, and the public response was incredibly enthusiastic. It was only natural. When hunting magical beasts that used poison, having a hunter with detoxification skills was essential. But not everyone had such a hunter as a teammate. In such situations, they had no choice but to wear gas masks during battles, which was inconvenient, or they had to seek detoxification from association healers after the battle. But now, with the antidote potion, the entire paradigm would change. And thanks to his contract with the Scavenger Guild, Suho would receive half of the profits from all the sales. However, such a massive contract could only be made between guilds. In other words, Mr. Sung Suho's guild will become a close partner of a major American guild from the moment of its establishment. And since our Ajin Soft will be mediating and managing that relationship, a tripartite contract is also necessary. Yes. So, where do I sign? Suho, already familiar with the details, picked up a pen, ignoring the lawyer's explanation. Thanks to Yu Jinho, the complicated contracts and paperwork were all taken care of. All that was left was for him to sign these numerous documents to establish the guild. As Suho was diligently signing all the papers, Yu Jinho suddenly looked at him with a serious expression. But there's one crucial thing left to do as a guild master. What is it? Suho's eyes also turned serious at his expression. His uncle, Yu Jinho, was the closest person to his father, who had regained all memories from his previous life. What could be the most important thing in his mind? Yu Jinho asked seriously. Have you decided on a guild name? Ah, just that? Suho shrugged at the anticlimactic question. He had been so busy that he hadn't even thought about it, but to complete these thick documents, he needed to write the guild name at the very top. Let's just call it Solo Play Guild. Wait a minute. Yu Jinho's sudden flustered reaction puzzled Suho. His expression was complex. Yu Jinho didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Oh dear, just like his father. Yu Jinho was reminded of a fond memory from the past. Sung Jinwoo had also wanted to casually name his guild Solo Play. Why? Is it weird? At Suho's question, Yu Jinho asked back, why do you want to use that name? There's no special reason. I just like to work alone. I don't plan on recruiting more guild members in the future either. That's true, but strictly speaking, you're not fighting alone. You have your shadow soldiers. Most importantly, it's too tacky. The guild name will be exposed in many places as it becomes known. Now that he thought about it, Yu Jinho had a point. His logical and desperate persuasion made Suho nod. It made sense. This was a guild he might be with for the rest of his life. The guild name should carry a meaning that represented him well. That's why I chose Solo Play, but it's useless if the meaning doesn't resonate. A word that represents me. Suho asked again. Then how about Woojin Guild? Woojin? Yu Jinho's eyes widened slightly as he pondered the sound of it. Could it be, did you reverse your father's name, Jinwoo? Yes, that's part of it, but there's another meaning too. What is it? Wu from universe, Jin from advance. Suho reaffirmed his purpose, what he had to do in the future, what he wanted to do, and the name he wanted to give to the guild that would grow alongside him to achieve that purpose. Together, they mean advance into the universe, Woojin. Yu Jinho was speechless at Suho's response. because I will definitely reach the universe where my father is. And so the Woojin Guild was established. After creating the guild, Suho began raiding dungeons in earnest. Now that he was a guild master, he realized there was a big difference between having a guild and not having one. Surprisingly, the fact that the guild master was a C-rank hunter didn't matter much. Such factors were only necessary when recruiting guild members. To secure dungeons for raiding, all that was needed was money. And Suho now had plenty. 1 billion won. For now, use 1 billion won to secure dungeons with the highest possible grades. Okay. Yes, guildmaster. Lim Do-gyun, who had finally emerged from the shadow dungeon after a long time, couldn't quite adapt to Suho's sudden wealth. But earning money was the hard part. Spending it was easy. And next month, there will be a lot more funds coming in from the Scavenger Guild, so take that into account and make some reservations in advance. Yes, sir, Lim Do-gyun replied energetically. Suho noticed that his movements were quite different from before. He's fast. And that change became even more apparent when Suho brought Lim Do-gyun into a dungeon. Why did you bring me here? Lim Do-gyun's role was to be a porter. He ran between Suho and the shadow soldiers as they hunted magical beasts, collecting magic stones. This task could have been done after the dungeon raid was over, or Suho could have simply assigned it to his shadow soldiers instead of bothering Lim Do-gyun. But there was a reason he brought him along this time. Wow, he's really good at running away. Suho was impressed. Ahmad had constantly made Lim Do-gyun run, and as a result, his lower body had been trained to its limits, and now he was skillfully evading the mid-level magical beasts attacking him. His magic power is still E-rank, but his strength itself has increased significantly. At this rate, wouldn't he be able to handle D-rank magical beasts or higher on his own? Of course, just because he was faster didn't mean his attack power had increased. But what if he equipped Lim Do-gyun with a good weapon, like a bow, for example? Of course, hunter bows used magic arrows as a base, so no matter how good the bow was, if it was in the hands of an E-rank hunter, its attack power would be very poor. Does he even have enough mana for a single shot? But what if it wasn't a magic arrow? Try holding this. Huh? What? No why? Lim Do-gyun, who reflexively took the bow Suho handed him, looked puzzled. Guildmaster, why are you giving me this? I don't have enough magic power to use weapons that consume mana. I know, just try aiming with it. Lim Do-gyun didn't understand, but he obediently followed Suho's instructions. The moment he pulled the bowstring, zwoosh! Mino, shape transformation. Lim Do-gyun was startled. The Shadow Minotaur, who had been fighting magic beasts, suddenly rushed towards him and transformed into a black arrow. Shape transformation. Heck, what is this? It's scary. Lim Do-gyun's hands trembled as he looked at Suho, the black shadow arrow flickering ominously on his bow. Suho, Guildmaster? What happens if I shoo? This. What do you mean, what happens? It'll fly forward, of course. Well, that's true. Come on, give it a try. What's the worst that can happen? At Suho's urging, Lim Do-gyun closed his eyes tightly and aimed the shadow arrowhead at the fearsome-looking magical beasts. And then, thump, the moment he released his hand. Kick! The black streak of light that left his hand pierced through the giant magical beast's body like a cannonball, leaving a large hole. Lim Do-gyun stared blankly at the scene with a priceless expression. What in the world? What do you mean, what in the world? Suho grinned and replied. From now on, you're a full-fledged combat member of the Woojin Guild. Guild Master. Lim Do-gyun looked at Suho with a serious gaze. An E-rank hunter. The weakest hunter, fit only for mining, not combat. That was him. I'm weak. No, he had always been weak. That's why. I always ran away. From scary magical beasts. From his mother, who turned into a mistburn and tried to kill him. And from my father, who killed my mother. Lim Do-gyun still dreamed of that day whenever he fell asleep. In those dreams, his father would kill the magical beast that his mother turned into without hesitation. And as he witnessed that scene, Lim Do-gyun would turn back on his father in fear and run away. Forever, until the dream ended. He would run and run endlessly. To escape from his father. Perhaps. My life has always been about running away. The fact that he gained the running skill right after awakening, That was natural. Because I'm weak. Even after awakening, he was only E rank. He still wasn't nearly as strong as his S rank father. But right now, Lim Do-gyun was looking down at his own 2 hands that had just killed a powerful magical beast in an instant. His hands trembled with belated excitement. Of course, he wasn't delusional. This power wasn't his own. It was merely a manifestation of the ability Suho had temporarily lent him. But for some reason, even this one experience made him feel a surge of courage he had never felt before. Suho. Lim Do-gyun looked at Suho with a serious gaze, and he revealed an important secret he had been hiding until now. My father is actually... Ah, yes, Lim Tae-gyu, the guild master of the Reaper Guild? I know. Lim Tae, what? Hetch, how do you know that? Suho looked at the shocked Lim Do-gyun with an incredulous expression. How could I not know? You resemble him so much. If I couldn't recognize that, I should return my Korea University of Fine Arts acceptance letter right away. Anyway, I guess you finally gained some courage now that you're talking about it? What? Pat. Suho placed his hand on Lim Do-gyun's shoulder. Then, with a meaningful smile, his eyes gleamed. Then, could you contact your father yourself now? Why? He's been calling me to return the weapon he lent me. Ha-ha? Huh? The A-rank weapon Lim Tae-gyu had lent Suho before going to the Glacier Dungeon. The Grim Reaper's bow was gone, taken by the ice elf, Circa, who left with his mother. No matter how rich Suho had become overnight, it was still only 1 billion won. Even if the spring water of the Echo Forest was selling like hotcakes, it had only been a few days since the sales began, so he didn't have the money to pay for that expensive A-rank weapon yet. So take this opportunity to reconcile with your father, and if possible, ask him if he can hand over some high-level dungeons. Lim Do-gyun's excitement quickly faded as he saw Suho's bright, toothy smile. Meanwhile, Chahayan! Circa urgently called out while aiming the Grim Reaper's replica at the sky. Swish! At her words, Chahayan also looked ahead with a heavy expression. Could that be? A gray blizzard, and beyond it a giant shadow loomed. Chapter 162, Chapter 161, Tomb of the Berserk Dragons. This was the site of the final battle between Sung Jinwoo, the Shadow Monarch, the King of the Dead, and Antares, the Monarch of Destruction, the King of Dragons. The war between these two powerful forces was truly fierce and relentless, and in the end, it was Sung Jinwoo's Shadow Legion that emerged victorious. As a result, since that day, the bodies of countless dragons, turned to ashes, have been scattered across this land like snow in a blizzard. Chahayan and Circa had ventured into this desolate and barren land to restore the strength of the Shadow Wyvern Kaisel, who, weakened from protecting Chahayan, had fallen into a deep sleep in her arms as soon as they arrived. It was a kind of hibernation. On the surface, it looked like he was merely asleep, but in reality, Kaisel was absorbing the faint remnants of the dragon's power that lingered in the gray ashes. While the Shadow Wyvern recovered his strength, Chahayan and Circa had only one thing to do: wander aimlessly through this wasteland. At first, they tried to find a suitable place to stay and wait for Kaisel to recover, but soon after, Kaisel woke up with a long yawn. What Kaisel wanted was clear: keep moving. The amount of power he could absorb in one place was limited. In a way, it was natural. The energy remaining in the corpses of the Berserk dragons was faint to begin with. For the depleted Kaisel to fully recover, they might have to travel all over this dimension. Understanding this, Chahayan and Circa began to wander the land, searching for new places to aid Kaisel's recovery. And after a long while, a truly massive and magnificent silhouette appeared before them. Cha-cha! I'll cover you! Under Circa's protection, Chahayan drew her sword and slowly approached it. As they made their way through the gray blizzard, finally its true form was revealed before them. Oh my God! They couldn't help but be shocked. Not all of them turned to ash. Surprisingly, right before their eyes were the remains of giant berserk dragons that had not yet turned to ash, their bones piled high. It's like we're in some kind of dinosaur museum. Chahayan was a little overwhelmed by the grandeur of the giant dragon bones. At that moment, Kaisel, who seemed to have woken up, looked around with sleepy eyes. Chahayan stroked his back and asked, "How do you feel? Does it seem like your strength is recovering faster here?" Kaisel closed his eyes contentedly at Chahayan's touch. Circa, who saw his expression from the side, said happily, "That's great. It's only natural that the recovery rate would be much higher around corpses with bones remaining than those turned to ash. Dragon corpses are a tremendous treasure in themselves." Chahayan nodded at Circa's words. Even recalling her memories from her past life, dragon bones were indeed an incredible resource. They boasted tremendous strength and durability, enough to support the weight of a massive dragon, and their mana responsiveness was naturally top-notch. "This is great. If we take these bones back to Earth and make weapons, it will be a huge help to Suho." "Yeah, they're weathered and worn from being here so long, but if we look carefully, there are probably still plenty of intact bone fragments." Just as Chahayan reached for her necklace to open her inventory, a chill ran down her spine. "Watch out!" Chahayan and Circa scattered in opposite directions, as if on cue, sensing the sudden killing intent. Boom! A massive explosion erupted where they had been standing. The shockwave from the explosion caused nearby dragon bones to collapse. Chahayan and Circa hurriedly dodged the debris and assumed combat stances. "I'll cover you." Circa quickly retreated and drew her bowstring, while Chahayan immediately charged forward with her sword. Then, the identities of those who caused the explosion were finally revealed. Kirukadra. Chahayan's eyes widened in surprise. They, air warriors and mages made of bones. But they weren't in the form of ordinary human-like skeletons. Circa, who was covering Chahayan from behind with arrows, recognized their identity and shouted in surprise. "They're dragon-tooth warriors." Dragon-tooth warriors? They were also known as Spartoi, Spardi in Greek, meaning the sown ones. They were legendary warriors, as their name suggested, born from dragon teeth sewn into the ground. It seems the dragon teeth that didn't turn to ash were reborn as monsters, Circa recalled. Antares, the king of dragons, the monarch of destruction, also known as the Dragon Emperor, was the most powerful of all the monarchs. He was the strongest dragon, and he led an invincible army with immense power and magic. During the long years, their corpses remained in this land without turning to ash. The power dwelling within their bones must have created these dragon-tooth warriors. But something didn't add up. Dragon-tooth warriors born without a master. Is that even possible? What do you mean? Surprised by Circa's reaction, Chahayan shouted towards her in between the swings of her sword. There were as many dragon-tooth warriors as corpses of dragons in this land, and they continued to crawl out of the ground, surrounding Chahayan and Circa. But, storm of white flames. Rumble. As Chahayan raised the Demon King's longsword high, hundreds of berserking bolts began to strike from the sky. Kirakrak. The Demon King's longsword contained the power of Baron, the monarch of white flames, the king of demons. And that sword had the power to create a storm where berserking endlessly raged. In the face of this overwhelming calamity, the dragon-tooth warriors should only be able to scream while turning into ash. However, they're withstanding this? Chahayan's eyes widened in disbelief. The dragon-tooth warriors were getting back up even amidst the storm of white flames, which had inflicted significant damage even on the apostles of Itarim. Cha-cha! I heard dragon-tooth warriors have high defense because they're born from dragon teeth. It certainly seems that way. Chahayan gripped her sword more firmly. Don't worry, Kaisel. You can keep sleeping. Sensing the commotion, Kaisel opened his eyes with a worried expression, but Chahayan reassured him with a chuckle. They're definitely taking damage, though. As she said, the dragon-tooth warriors directly hit by the berserking had become noticeably slower. If they kept taking them down one by one, wouldn't they all eventually fall? Chahayan swung her sword, slicing the waist of the dragon-tooth warrior in front of her, and then looked back at her companion. Circa, so what were you about to say earlier? What's strange? Ah! Circa shot an arrow at the dragon-tooth warrior mage, the furthest from her, and replied. I don't know much about dragons, but I do know one thing for sure. Dragon-tooth warriors can't exist without a master. They need a master? Yes. I heard dragons originally pull out their own teeth to create dragon-tooth warriors. Their purpose is obviously to protect themselves. More precisely, Circa's gaze turned to Kaisel, who was sleeping on Chahayan's shoulder. To protect the dragon while it's hibernating. That's the true purpose of the Dragon Tooth Warriors. What? Hearing Circa's words, Chahayan realized something was amiss and looked around. But there are no living dragons here? That's why it's strange. Dragon Tooth Warriors without a master turned back into teeth. Then what are these guys? It was certainly strange. For so many Dragon Tooth Warriors to exist, there should be a corresponding number of living dragons here. But no matter where they looked, they couldn't even find a single one. That meant the seeds for these Dragon Tooth Warriors must have been the teeth from these corpses. Could it be that they have a new master? Or someone who can create Dragon Tooth Warriors even with other dragons' teeth has appeared? It all leads to a similar conclusion, and it doesn't seem like they'll answer if we ask. Thanks to Cha Hai-in's translation necklace, she was able to understand the words coming from the Dragon Tooth Warriors' mouths. Kirakara, kill the intruders. Intruders. That means we've intruded somewhere, or they don't want us around here. Where could that place be? Cha Hai-in calmly looked around and cut down another Dragon Tooth Warrior, then shouted, Circa, I'll hold them off for a bit, so you send a prayer to the Monarch of Frost. As a descendant of the Frost Monarch, Circa could communicate her thoughts to him, while Suho, as the High Priest, could awaken the slumbering spirit of the monarch. Circa could only send a one-way message through prayer, and that message would be delivered to the High Priest through the Monarch of Frost. This isn't exactly what prayers are usually used for. Circa started praying to the Monarch of Frost, Silad, with a berserkly embarrassed expression. So what message should I ask him to deliver? Meanwhile, Suho and Lim Do-gyun had arrived in Busan. Their purpose, of course, was dungeon raiding. But this raid was going to be a bit special. Are you the guild master of Wujin Guild? No, I'm the vice guild master, Lim Do-gyun. Our guild master is this way. Oh, I apologize. At Lim Do-gyun's words, the female hunter who had come to greet Wujin Guild blushed and quickly apologized. Then, with an awkward expression, she approached Suho and greeted him with a bright smile. Hello, I'm Li Juhee, a healer from the Knights Guild. Welcome to Busan. Hello, thank you, I'm Sung Suho, the guild master. But for some reason, as soon as Li Juhee greeted Suho and made eye contact, she stared at his face with a strange expression. Suho asked with a puzzled look. Is something wrong? Oh no, I'm sorry. Your face looked familiar for some reason. I guess it was just my imagination. Li Juhee apologized to Suho belatedly with an embarrassed expression. I'm being so silly today. How could I possibly know this young man? When I lived in Seoul, he probably wasn't even born yet. Berating herself for her frequent mistakes today, Li Juhee quickly got to the point. Ahem. Anyway, Guildmaster Sung Suho, thank you so much for coming to help our Knights Guild. Hunter Lim Taegyu has already arrived at the guild office and is waiting for you. I'll show you the way. Lim Do-gyun gulped nervously at the mention of his father waiting for them. Chapter 163. Chapter 162. Suho's Wujin Guild had just one simple criterion for selecting dungeons: leveling up as quickly as possible. In other words, high-ranked dungeons or those with a large number of magic beasts were the best for gaining experience. But naturally, such gates were also popular with other hunters. This was because the remains of strong monsters were often valuable, and the more monsters there were, the more valuable materials could be obtained, and because of that, the rights to raid such dungeons were expensive. Currently, Suho's guild had 1 billion won in funds. This was an ambiguous amount of money, neither a fortune nor a small amount, so they had to make a choice. Either split the guild's 1 billion won and raid multiple low to mid-level dungeons, or all in and purchase a single higher-level raid license. Both of these would be decent choices for a typical guild focused on profit. However, for Suho, whose main goal was leveling up, neither option was ideal. Having surpassed level 50, he could no longer gain experience, let alone level up, in low to mid-level dungeons. And even a high-level dungeon might not guarantee a single level up. Of course, once the larger payments from the Scavenger Guild started coming in next month, everything would be resolved. But he couldn't just sit idly in the office until then. So the option Suho chose was neither of the two. Even if it was somewhat inefficient from a profit-oriented guild perspective, there was another way if the goal was just leveling up. Enter a dungeon already claimed by another guild. This third method could be further divided into two approaches. One was to act as mercenaries, responding to another guild's request for assistance. If a guild that had won a bidding competition determined that the dungeon's difficulty was higher than expected, they might request support from other guilds or hunters. However, this was quite rare. Most guilds purchased raid licenses only for those dungeons they were sure could clear on their own. That left one option: acquire the raid license from another guild. Usually, it would be transferred at a higher cost than the original purchase price, with a premium added. But this was also difficult for Woojin Guild with its limited funds, so the method Suho came up with was to utilize blood ties. That's why I was trying to buy the raid license from the Reaper Guild through Lim Do-gyun as an intermediary. After the Lee Min-sung incident, the Reaper Guild was suffering from a severe manpower shortage. It was only natural that they no longer had the capacity to clear all the dungeons they held raid licenses for. They might even need to urgently sell their licenses to maintain cash flow. And since it was the guild his son belonged to, they might be willing to hand over the raid license at a slightly lower price. Suho's plan was perfect, except there was something he hadn't considered. So the Reaper Guild is in that much trouble? Lim Tae-ju was ruined. The Reaper Guild, once considered the best guild in South Korea, had steadily declined after the Lee Min-sung incident. Thanks to Kwei, who after his death handed over all of his hidden funds to Lim Tae-ju, their financial difficulties, which put them on the verge of bankruptcy, were alleviated. The problem was that this didn't make the hunters who had already terminated their contracts and left the guild return. The company's image had already hit rock bottom, so Lim Tae-ju made a bold decision, saying he would go back to basics. Instead of recruiting new guild members, he used the remaining funds to increase the value of the guild members who had remained loyal despite the circumstances. Then, he shed the image of a large guild and started operating as a small, elite guild, just like the Woojin Guild led by Suho. Anyway, because of this situation, Lim Tae-ju was in a similar predicament as Suho. The Reaper Guild he led decided to operate as a mercenary group for a while, as it was the most cost-effective way to utilize their funds. Contrary, their tarnished public image, they were instantly welcomed in the industry, as it was unprecedented for a mercenary group to include an S-rank hunter. And the first guild to send a love call to them was the Knights, the representative guild of the Yeongnam region. As you probably already know, our guild has the most A-rank hunters in the country. On their way to the office, B-rank healer Lee Joo-hee explained about her guild to Suho. However, while we have many A-ranks, we don't have a single S-rank hunter, which sometimes leads to difficult situations like this, so we're very grateful to Hunter Lim Tae-ju for coming as a mercenary this time. Every time Lee Joo-hee mentioned Lim Tae-ju's name, Lim Do-gyun, walking beside Suho, flinched and stiffened. Seeing this, Suho chuckled and lightly patted Lim Do-gyun's back. "Relax, you look like you're going into battle." "Yeah, sure." Lim Do-gyun was already a nervous wreck. And finally, the inevitable moment arrived. This is the office. It seems they're in the middle of a strategy meeting. Knock, knock. Lee Joo-hee knocked on the office door and entered, followed by Suho and Lim Do-gyun. At that moment, the gazes of all the hunters who had been in a heated discussion turned towards them. What? Who's suddenly interrupting the meeting? Those who were about to speak fell silent when they recognized Lee Joo-hee beside Suho. The additional mercenary support has arrived. At her answer, the hunters' eyes momentarily lit up. At the same time, their gazes quickly scanned Suho and Lim Do-gyun standing beside her. The people gathered here were the leaders of the Knights Guild. This was a meeting to address the emergency in Hyundai, Busan, so any skilled hunter was welcome. However, things were different if they couldn't prove their skills. Woojin Guild. According to the information, it's a newly established guild. And it's a small guild with only 3 members, including the guild master. Under normal circumstances, they would never accept such an unproven guild as mercenaries. In an emergency like this, if unskilled people got in the way, it could lead to a major accident. But the person who recommended Woojin Guild was none other than Lim Tae-ju. Although technically a mercenary, as an S-rank hunter, he was essentially the core and de facto leader of this operation, and the Knights Guild, which lacked an S-rank hunter, had been heavily influenced by his opinion. If Lim Taeju recommended them himself, they must have some hidden potential, right? Judging by their small numbers, they might be a guild focused on buff skills or healing. Various thoughts crossed their minds, but ultimately, they couldn't help but underestimate Suho, seeing Lim Do-gyun's frozen expression beside him. They're just kids after all. This is worrisome. Hopefully, they won't just hold us back. At the sight of Lim Do-gyun standing there like a statue, unable to even breathe properly, the hunters couldn't help but click their tongues. They all, without exception, glanced at Lim Taeju, who was leading the meeting from the podium. Even with Lim Taeju's recommendation, we'll have to oppose this. What was Lim Taeju thinking? But what was this? Lim Taeju, who had been strategizing with charismatic authority on the podium, now had the same frozen expression as Lim Do-gyun. What's going on here? The hunters exchanged puzzled looks, alternately glancing at the two who had frozen upon seeing each other. The father-son reunion, made possible thanks to Suho, began in a tense atmosphere. Seeing Lim Taeju and Lim Do-gyun, both lacking the courage to speak first, even the Knights Guild leaders couldn't help but swallow nervously. Upon realizing that Lim Do-gyun was Lim Taeju's son, they remembered the heartbreaking story in their information network. On the day he awakened, his wife turned into a mist burn, and that mist burn attacked his son. To save his son, Lim Taeju had to kill his own wife with his own hands. This incident was a well-known story, and his son ran away from home after that, right? It's understandable. No matter the circumstances, he witnessed his father killing his mother. Knowing the situation, they could understand the atmosphere. However, why are they doing this here? I wish they would just leave. It was suffocating. We're so busy. Park Jong-soo, the president of the Knights Guild, and Suho ignored the awkwardness and shook hands. Nice to meet you. I'm Park Jong-soo, an A-rank hunter leading the Knights Guild. I'm Sung Suho, the president of Woojin Guild. Park Jong-soo was quite a polite and courteous person, or rather, he had no choice but to act that way. Unlike the other leaders, he had heard about Suho from Lim Taeju beforehand. The mysterious person in the photo taken with Hunter Lim Taeju during the Lee Min-sung incident. The drone photo had been of such poor quality that the face of this unknown individual couldn't be clearly identified. Countless guilds had been desperate to uncover his identity, hoping he was a promising new hunter. And now, he had come to them on his own. This was an opportunity. If, as Lim Taeju said, he turned out to be a tremendous talent in the future, there was no harm in forming a good relationship with him. Park Jong-soo gave a friendly smile and personally pulled out a chair for Suho. Here, President Sung Suho, please have a seat. Since time is of the essence, let's have a more in-depth conversation after the meeting. Finally, the meeting began. Lim Taeju, unable to have a proper conversation with Lim Do-gyun, went back to the podium to continue the meeting. Lim Do-gyun, who ended up sitting next to Suho, gradually calmed down as he watched his father. Chapter 164, Chapter 163, Hondae, Busan. It was relatively recently that strange things started happening on this beautiful white beach, which becomes overcrowded during the vacation season. The Knights Guild, the representative guild of the Yeongnam region, received reports of people continuously disappearing in Hondae and started patrolling the entire area, and they ended up discovering them. Skeletons. At Lim Taeju's words, the leaders of the Knights Guild fell silent. The areas where they appear are gradually expanding. The video showed numerous skeletal soldiers emerging from beneath the sand and hunters fighting them off. Watching the battle unfolding on the screen, Park Jong-soo, the president of the Knights Guild, gritted his teeth with a serious expression. The problem is, we have no idea where they are coming from. Judging from the situation, it was clear that a dungeon break had occurred in the waters off Busan. However, they couldn't find the location of the gate, the core of the issue. The endlessly multiplying skeletons mean that there's a necromancer-type monster behind this, summoning them. Assuming that it's boss-type, it should be located at the end of a dungeon, or in this case, most likely inside or near the gate. Finally breaking the silence, the leaders spoke up. That's why our Knights Guild is focusing all our efforts on searching for the gate. But we can't find its location at all. We're even suspecting that the gate might have appeared underwater. That's impossible. There's no precedent for a gate appearing underwater. The cataclysm happened only 2 years ago. New precedents can be set anytime. Gates, dimensional rifts connecting Earth to otherworldly dimensions. This mysterious phenomenon could appear suddenly anywhere in the world. But for some reason, there had never been a single instance of a gate being observed in the ever-changing and turbulent depths of the sea. Despite the unknown cause, humanity was fortunate. The prospect of a future without the sea was bleak, no matter how one envisioned it. However, they couldn't be complacent forever. Just as no one had foreseen the cataclysm 2 years ago, no one could know what unexpected changes might occur in the future. The hunter who raised his voice at the end was pointing out this very fact. Enough. With Lim Taeju's single word, the heated atmosphere among the hunters instantly calmed down. The people gathered here were the leaders of the Knights Guild, meaning they were all A-rank hunters. While there might be differences in their individual strength, they were essentially hunters of the same rank, so their voices carried equal weight. But precisely because of that, Lim Taeju, the only S-rank hunter among them, held more authority than anyone else. As the room fell silent, Lim Taeju spoke again. Sure, it's important to keep an open mind and consider all the options, but it is impossible to prepare for everything. If the gate had indeed appeared underwater, it wasn't a problem that could be solved with the forces currently gathered here, a situation they couldn't hope to handle. So Lim Taeju believed it was better to rule out that possibility for the time being. So, for now, we'll form search teams under the assumption that the gate is hidden somewhere along the coast. Lim Taeju's gaze swept across the room and met Suho's. You understand the situation now, right? Suho read his intention and nodded silently. Ahem. In that sense, we currently have 2 immediate tasks. Suddenly noticing Lim Do-gyun beside Suho, Lim Taeju coughed briefly and averted his gaze, then continued the explanation. One is to continuously fend off the endless stream of monsters appearing on the coast. Of course, you're already doing a good job, but we need to deploy as many troops as possible to that area. Everyone nodded in agreement. To prevent the monsters from leaving the beach and flooding into the city, the more troops, the better. Moreover, the monsters that first appeared in a dungeon break were always weaker than those that came later, as if they were scouts. In other words, due to the nature of dungeon breaks, although it was only skeletons now, there was a high probability that more dangerous monsters would appear later. To prepare for this, they needed to deploy their forces with ample margin. 2. Find the location of the gate as quickly as possible. This task involves navigating through the monsters, so we'll form a small, elite search team led by me. At that, President Park Jong-soo raised his hand and asked a question. Is there a specific criterion for this small, elite team? Yes. Since the main objective is searching, we'll select people who are confident in their speed rather than combat power. Speed rather than combat power? At those words, Lim Do-gyun's eyes widened, and when it was time to volunteer for the search team, he raised his hand high. Lim Taeju was startled but continued speaking in a calm tone. Ah, I forgot to mention one thing. Only those ranked B or higher can volunteer for the gate search team. It's a very dangerous task, as there's a high chance of encountering the boss monster out of the blue. But even after hearing that, Lim Do-gyun had no intention of lowering his hand. I'm confident in my speed. He was well versed in running away. Seeing Lim Do-gyun's determined gaze, Lim Taeju looked at Suho, hoping he would dissuade his son. But Suho just chuckled and raised his own hand, saying, We're not B rank, but Woojin Guild would also like to join the search team. All right, let's do that. In the end, Lim Taeju had no choice but to nod with a reluctant expression. The reason he had brought Suho here in the first place was to have him join the gate search team. But he hadn't imagined that his son, a mere E-rank hunter, would also volunteer. But he's the guild master, so he'll take responsibility for his guild members' safety. They even went to the glacier dungeon together. Suppressing his unease, Lim Taeju conveyed the detailed strategies to the hunters and concluded the meeting. Then, let's begin the operation. Thus, a total of 20 people formed the search team. Lim Taeju further divided them into 5 groups of 4. But here, a problem arose. I'll lead the first group, and Hunter Sung Suho from Woojin Guild will lead the second group. And the third group. What? Excuse me? The hunters who had volunteered for the search team, assuming the S-rank hunter Lim Taeju would lead them, were understandably bewildered. But this is different from what we were told. I heard Sung Suho is a C-rank hunter. How can you put our lives at risk like this? As if expecting such complaints, Lim Taeju calmly responded to them. Again, our goal is to search, not fight. That's why I specifically asked for those who are fast on their feet. That's true, but we're searching for the boss monster's location. Shouldn't there be at least a minimum guarantee of safety? Exactly, and I'm a B-rank hunter. Does it make sense for me to follow the orders of a mere C-rank hunter? Sigh. Mere, you say? Their complaints were valid, but Lim Taeju couldn't help but let out a hollow laugh. Suho. No, President Sung Suho. Haven't you gotten reevaluated yet? I've been busy setting up the guild. Make sure to get reevaluated after this. That way, we won't waste time on pointless arguments like, if that's the case, I'll take charge of the second group. I'll leave the third group to my subordinate. While Suho was talking, the hunter who was supposed to lead the third group stepped forward confidently. A-rank hunter Jung Yoon-tae. He was the vice president of the Knights Guild and had a close relationship with President Park Jong-soo. Jung Yoon-tae looked at the members of the second group with disapproval. Sung Suho, despite being a guild master, is still only a C-rank hunter. Lim Do-gyun, an E-rank hunter who was supposedly his guild member. And next to them, who's that woman? Is she a hunter from the Woojin Guild? Next to them was Esiel, whom Suho had summoned from the Shadow Dungeon, now included in the second group as a member of Woojin Guild. And the remaining member was a B-rank hunter from the Knights Guild. Tsk. Jung Yoon-tae clicked his tongue and said, the second group's combat power is particularly weak compared to the others. In that case, it would be better for me to switch to the second group. Of course, I'll be the leader. Sure, go ahead. Huh? Jung Yoon-tae was taken aback by Suho's easy acceptance. Suho transferred the Knights Guild member to the third group and readily stepped down as the leader. Then, pushing Jung Yoon-tae, who had become the new leader of the second group, he said, I don't mind, so let's get going. Jung Yoon-tae, who had unexpectedly become the leader of the second group, felt something was odd, but in any case, the 4 members were chosen. A little later, Lim Taeju gave his final instructions to the search teams that had arrived in Hyundai. Then, each group will disperse to their designated areas. Whether there's a special situation or not, let's exchange information in real time as much as possible. Yes, sir. Jung Yoon-tae responded energetically to Lim Taeju's words and then turned to the hunters of the weak second group he was leading, giving them orders. Our second group will break through the skeletons and start searching from behind them. Let's go. With those words, Jung Yoon-tae dashed forward at tremendous speed. Then, he turned around and shouted, trying to match the pace with his team members. Don't fall behind. Huh? There was no one behind him. Huh? Jung Yoon-tae turned his head forward again with a puzzled expression. Surprisingly, all the hunters from the second group were running ahead of him. Their speed is impressive, so this is why Hunter Lim Taeju included Woojin Guild in the search team. Jung Yoon-tae was impressed and increased his own speed. But what was this? No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't catch up to them. Not even Lim Do-gyun, an E-rank hunter. This can't be right. It wasn't just Jung Yoon-tae who was surprised by this sight. Even Lim Taeju, who had been watching the second group from afar with concern, couldn't help but widen his eyes. Then, snapping out of it, Jung Yoon-tae hurriedly followed the second group hunters, shouting, Wait, there are too many skeletons over there. It's safer to go with me. At that moment, perfect. For leveling up, Suho, who was running at the front, raised his fist towards the swarming skeletons ahead. Blizzard of frost. Whoosh! A biting cold swept through, engulfing the skeletons rushing towards Suho. Crack! The white blizzard swept over the bare bones, even freezing the waves rolling in behind them. the king of the snowfolk, the monarch of frost, opens his eyes. At that moment, the slumbering monarch of frost, Silad, awoke. Chapter 165, Chapter 164. Many people gathered around Hondae Beach. A lot of them were citizens and reporters who came to watch the unexpected outbreak of the undead monsters. Please refrain from accessing past this point. It's dangerous, said the police and the Hunter Association staff from the Busan branch as they were struggling to set up fences and restrict the access to that area. But somehow, the sound of rushing footsteps did not diminish at all. This is so frightening. I've heard that even an S-rank hunter from Seoul had to come. After the cataclysm, being a hunter became one of the most popular professions. If you were to enter the dungeon by yourself, you would soon find that there aren't as many dangerous things inside as they would have you believe. Because of this, it was natural for everyone to envy the hunters who could earn a lot of money. Among them, S-class hunters often gained popularity comparable to that of celebrities. Once a dungeon break occurred in an open place such as this, the reactions of the citizens divided themselves in two: either run away or come to watch. Most of them chose the former, yet there were still surprisingly many people who flocked to see the gates for themselves without fear. And one example of this category was, "Are you seeing these viewers?" I ventured out to look with my own eyes at the skeletons you only see in movies. If you send donations, we will launch the drone right away. Guys, the president of the Reaper Guild, Lim Tae-gyu, has joined as support on this raid. We should see him any moment now. Thank you for the moon balloon one. Amongst the citizens, there were quite a few personal streamers who proclaimed themselves to be reporters. Some even came out with their expensive drones to relay the situation of the battle. These were the cases that exposed themselves to a lot of danger solely to increase their donations. Senior, the female employee of the association who had been hit by the crowd in the front, asked with a tearful expression, "Does this happen every time there is a dungeon break?" What did you expect? This is the largest dungeon break ever in Busan. The senior pressed down his throbbing brow with a tired expression. The sight of the superior looking back at her made the fatigue even thicker. Had the gate been discovered earlier, the situation wouldn't have escalated to this extent. Not to mention the sight of the skeleton soldiers from the sea off Busan. It made you feel as though you entered the scene from the classic movie, Pirates of the Caribbean. In addition, this time the S-class hunter who recently attracted the news appeared directly in front of them, so the interest and excitement were indescribable, to say the least. Isn't this good content? If I were a reporter, I would have come out with my camera as well. Sasu, who was also a fan of streaming, sighed at the irony. Although it's really cool to see him up close. Who? Lim Tae-gyu? Yes, who else? You know he can shoot 10 arrows at once, and they all hit. Well, despite the controversies surrounding him, he is still an S-class hunter. As he said this, the senior's eyes were also following Lim Tae-gyu and giving out small exclamations. I heard that Lim Tae-gyu was also put on the scouting team rather than fighting directly. Unlike every other archer, he didn't just shoot from a safe place. Instead, he used his agility to run directly between the skeletons whilst tracking the traces of where the gate was located. Whenever he got surrounded, he would shoot his bow and clear the road ahead. I'm donating 10,000 won for every 10 kills that Lim Tae-gyu does. I'm donating 50,000 won for every 100 kills Lim Tae-gyu does. Kia, thank you for the donations. Viewers, I'll be counting the skeletons that Lim Tae-gyu kills in real time. What the? In a sharp contrast to the hunters who risked their lives fighting, something absurd was happening on the outskirts of the beach. There was a ridiculous amount of huge donations pouring in that was proportional to the number of beasts dying. All of this happened in less than a minute, since the scouting team and Lim Tae-gyu had gone out to fight. Does the entire country suddenly come out when I fight? He wondered if this was the reason for that proverb, bears do tricks while the bear owners get money. Although the reality was that the hunters who played the bears here earned far more money than a personal streamer could ever dream about, so there was no reason to be mad at them. Besides, isn't this also kind of creative in this economy? Anyways, from the association's point of view, the only thing that mattered was solving the situation safely and without anyone getting hurt. All of a sudden, a new oddity appeared. Whoa. A wave of cold air hit them. Huh? All the eyes that had been looking at Lim Taegyu went wide and suddenly turned in one direction. What is that? Said Lim Taegyu, while he and the scouting team spread out around the area. Many hunters gathered in Busan to deal with the emergency, including A-classes such as the famous guildmaster of the Knights. Among them were also a few unknown faces. One of them reached out his hand, and a part of the sea around them turned into an Arctic landscape. Skeletons that were crawling out of the sandy beach, as well as the waves leaping behind them, became frozen solid. The expressions of everyone who saw the scene also temporarily froze. Who is that person? Fellow viewers, does anyone have information about that hunter? Astonishment began to burst out here and there, and Hyundai Beach was filled with the sound of cheers. Papa, search quickly. Who are the people that volunteered for the scouting team? I'm doing it now. Even the reporters from broadcasting stations quickly started asking the Knights Guild for information. Some reckless streamers started grabbing the association staff, who were controlling the crowd, and began to beg for answers. Who the hell is that hunter? Please give us some info. That's a blizzard, right? Even among the advanced magic hunters, only a few can pull off such spells to this extent. As far as I know, it would take a lot of mana to use such a wide-range magic, so who the hell? 1,000,001 to the person who finds the hunter's identity the fastest. If you let me know, I will share the donations with you. Stop coming. You can't go any further than this place. Please refrain from crossing the safety line. The reactions of the maddening civilians were quite natural, considering no one had ever expected to see such a wide-range magic that was capable of causing such extreme weather. This cold blizzard suddenly blew into the sunny skies and froze hundreds of skeletons all at once. It's the first time that this kind of hunter has ever appeared in our country. I found it! Everyone suddenly turned their attention to the cry of the stranger. There, a streamer who had connections to the Knights Guild held up his cell phone like it was the World Cup trophy while shouting triumphantly. Woojin Guild! He's from Woojin Guild. His name is Sung Suho, a hunter from the Woojin Guild. Huh? Woojin Guild? This is my first time hearing of them. Is it a new guild? Once they finally found out the identity of the hunter who used blizzard magic, people began to be confused. There was nobody who had any information about the Woojin Guild, except for one person who had a very good memory. Wait a minute, could it be Sung Suho? They frantically started searching the internet for some articles that they had seen before. Sung Suho, isn't that the hunter who solved Lee Min-sung's case? Yeah, that's right. There's also a picture of him with Baek Miho and Lim Taegyu side by side. The collective intelligence of people was truly astonishing. After Suho used his skill, he smiled, knowing the spectators had managed to figure out his identity in an instant. Just as planned, he quietly thought while watching the commotion from afar. Thank goodness I created a guild. There are rarely good situations like this where I can get free publicity. During the various cases he was solving, Suho had continued to hide his identity, half for his own sake, half because of others. The purpose was just to avoid revealing the use of the Shadow Monarch's powers to the apostles of Itarim, who, of course, were hiding in plain sight. But he could afford to show off other skills in public, like the ones similar to abilities other hunters possessed. It's for the best, actually. The reputation of the guild was now more important to Suho's plan than anything else. For what reason did he create a guild in the first place? To level up, of course. He planned to make a guild in order to enter higher-ranked dungeons and level up more. However, those gates could be bought with money that was scheduled to come from the Scavenger Guild next month. Why would he try to increase his guild's reputation then? The basic reason was, in order to go to North Korea, and the guild's reputation was crucial for that. Advanced dungeons are important, yes, but Suho's ultimate objective was to cross the border so he could hunt. After the cataclysm, North Korea was turned into a monster field, becoming an inaccessible demonic realm. To put things into perspective, the chairman of the association Woo Jin-chul, who went out to aid them with Choi Jong-in, wasn't even able to come back yet. If they didn't wipe out the monsters swarming their neighbor's territory in time, they would come down to invade South Korea afterwards. Supposedly, they were meant to aid, but their actions seemed close to a conquest of the North. But for Suho, even the worst environment in North Korea was like a paradise, filled with chunks of experience all over the place. The problem was that North Korea was not a place just anyone could go to. Even if the government collapsed completely, it still wouldn't unite the two Koreas. Moreover, hunters who committed crimes like the villains at Jisan prison would also want to go there. Because in this situation, if just anyone was allowed to cross the border without any restrictions, then the criminals would be the first to run away to a place where their skills would be wanted. This would mean they would have a strong chance to mercilessly commit crimes against the survivors of North Korea still alive everywhere. It would become a lawless place. So, the Korean government and the Hunter Association were legally blocking unqualified guilds from ever stepping foot on North Korean soil. The most important of these qualifications was awareness. A guild had to be recognized by the public, and one of the most effective ways to gain recognition was to play an important role in helping with disasters that citizens paid attention to. Issues like Jisan prison were ambiguous. Wiping out 500 villains was a respectable thing to do, but the public opinion divided itself more than he thought. He is a person who slaughtered 500 people in one day. That isn't normal. He's a killer at minimum. But isn't it okay since he killed the villains and not the people? His identity was protected by the White Tiger Guild following his cooperation within them. If it ever came to light that he was the one to have killed all of the villains, it would be difficult for Suho to access North Korea. But with this, as part of the scouting team, Suho jumped into the middle of the skeletons and showed his strength without hesitation. That kid is the real deal. I sent you out to scout for the gate, but you are annihilating the skeletons instead, Lim Tae-gyu said, seeing Suho's splendid debut, making him embarrassed. Did he have a skill like that before, or did he receive a runestone as a gift from Thomas Andre? The power of it was truly an unbelievable sight. A cold snowstorm was unstoppable in the coastal waters of Hande. A white, icy road spread out like a carpet with Suho in the center of it, running without hesitation past the skeletons frozen like statues. He wondered just what kind of nickname people would give him during the live broadcast, seeing such an impressive feat. Stop! Huh! Suho, who was still rushing forward without hesitation, suddenly stopped walking and listened to Silad's words. The Frost Monarch, king of snowfolk, listens to circus moon balloons, sort of like a donation in webcam streaming videos. $7,556. For around $38. $758. Chapter 166, Chapter 165, King of the Snowfolk and the Monarch of Frost, listens to circus prayer. Circa, descendant of the Frost Monarch, prays earnestly. Silad heard the earnest prayers of Circa, who had left to search the tombs of the dragons with Cha-haen earlier. The descendants' prayers originally had one purpose, to offer praise and worship for the spirits of the dead. Because Circa had been a descendant of his own choosing, Silad readily responded to her first prayer. I can't imagine how heartfelt and wonderful the first prayer ever directed at me will be. Wait, hold on, what is this? Of course, it was nothing like the worships he had seen before. Mr. Silad, we're in a hurry right now. Can you call Suho for us? Huh? The Frost Monarch doubted his ears. Oh, if it's possible, could you also show him the things we are seeing too? Although even for a monarch, even that might be too difficult, huh? The Frost Monarch widens his eyes and opens his mouth at Circa's provocation. Her purpose in talking to Silad was clear. Just like modern humans, Circa was using the prayers as an excuse to text message Suho, or even video message. How could he, king of the snowfolk and the monarch of frost, be used as a simple messenger? No, I mustn't get mad. This is still the first prayer after all. But still, there should be a sacrifice or greetings at minimum. The Frost Monarch falls into thought with a remorseful expression. The Frost Monarch sighs deeply. Why are you so noisy all of a sudden? In a different place, Suho clicked his tongue briefly as he watched the system's messages appear one after another in front of him. His confusion was apparent as he could only hear Silad muttering to himself while he had been running forward to strike the frozen skeletons. Ding! A message has arrived. A message? Another window suddenly popped up in front of him. Could it be a new level-up quest? Suho immediately opened the message box. You have one unread message. Unread. A letter from my mother? Confusion appeared in Suho's eyes. At first, he had seen something about Circa's prayer, and now it seemed like there was a real message that arrived instead of a quest. Not to mention that it came from the Tomb of the Dragons where his mother had gone. Did something happen to her? Check message. Suho rapidly opened it to see the contents of it. A belt rang, and at that moment, Chahayan's voice was heard from beyond their dimension. Suho, it seems like we found something here. Can you ask Beru to check what it is? Beru suddenly popped out from behind Suho's arms. Silad, king of the snowfolk and the monarch of frost, uses his skill Ice Flower Illusion. All of a sudden, a frigid blizzard that raged in all directions started to spread around Suho, making transparent ice flowers bloom similarly to a spring haze or a mirage in the desert. And in front of him, the images of Chahayan and Circa, who were in the Tomb of Dragons, began to spread out. The ice flowers became smaller and smaller as they showed the place where his mother stood in more and more detail. Gigantic bones of berserk dragons towering over them like huge pillars. Underneath, Chahayan and Circa fought a battle against the numerous dragon soldiers that surrounded them. Unbelievable! It's a dragon soldier! Beru wore an expression of disbelief. Little monarch, this is a big deal. Realizing Chahayan's motive behind showing him that scene, he promptly explained it to Suho. The dragon soldiers are beings born from dragon teeth, but they disappear as soon as their owner dies. So how? Hold on. Does this mean there are as many soldiers as there are living dragons where my mother is? No, that's nonsense. The Destruction Monarch's legions were killed and incorporated into the Shadow Army. Beru fell silent, suddenly realizing something in the middle of the sentence and opening his eyes. I can't believe the descendant of the Destruction Monarch is Beru Ha. No choice but to hold back his words. The King of Dragons, the Monarch of Destruction, Antares. He was the strongest of 8 monarchs born from the primordial darkness, and the only one who could overpower him was the Shadow Monarch Sung Jinwoo. He was the true incarnation of destruction, willing to destroy everything, including himself, for the sake of waging a war of blood, screams, madness, and devastation. It's for that reason that Sung Jinwoo had relentlessly attacked the dragon race until they went extinct. Not a single dragon survived meeting the Shadow Monarch. What was the reason Sung Jinwoo had fought such a terrible battle? Wasn't it because he was concerned that a descendant of the Dragon Emperor could appear later? But the descendant of Antares must have appeared anyway. Beru couldn't believe the situation at all. Yet the dragon soldiers teaming around them were proof. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, Suho hurriedly opened his mouth. Silad, tell my mother to get out of there as quickly as possible. Right as he said that, in the illusion of the ice flower, Chahayan raised her sword. From above, silent lightning bolts stretched out and pierced the dragon soldiers. Chahayan's cheerful voice was heard again by Suho and Beru. Do you really think you need to worry about your mother? The demonic spirit king's longsword in Chahayan's hands was the weapon of Baran, king of demonic spirits, monarch of white flames. There couldn't be anything more dangerous here than an S-class hunter carrying such a powerful weapon. Even if the descendant of the monarch of destruction appeared, it will still be only a descendant. They wouldn't be a threat to Chahayan. Something seems to be strange here. There are many dragon soldiers, but no matter where I look, I can't find a single living dragon. Hearing Chahayan's words, Beru calmed down. Considering the size of a dragon, there shouldn't be a way to hide such a huge creature in such an empty world. Looking at the movements, it seems as though their protective instincts are really strong. Beru, do you think you could give me some advice? I think I understand the situation. With those words, Beru looked at the ice flower illusion with calm eyes. While in the meantime, Suho kept wandering among the frozen skeletons in the cold blizzard, looking for traces of a hidden gate. After thinking for some time, Beru finally opened his mouth. First of all, dragons have a habit of gathering their magical energy inside their hearts, so anything important will most likely be near that part of their body. No matter how many bones were left, the corpses of the dragons were still in the same position in which they died. Their gigantic bodies were similar to huge ruins. The place Beru pointed towards was around where the heart of this corpse should have been. Silad, king of the snowfolk and the monarch of frost, nods his head saying that he will convey that. But as soon as Silad said that, something unexpected happened. Who dares to use magic in front of me? Ding! The skill Ice Flower Illusion is forcibly cancelled. Silad's skill shattered as the entire sandy beach full of skeletons began to sway like waves. Eh! Kag! What is this? The hunters that fought the skeletons struggled to keep their balance on the shifting surface. To make matters worse, the sand they were standing on formed a huge whirlpool and began to suck everyone, including the skeletons, down like a vortex. The phenomena even reached the citizens watching from afar. Viewers, it seems something strange is happening. Ah! The streamer who had been piloting his drone had unknowingly come close to the scene and was sucked into the sand, with both legs stuck. He couldn't run away. Help! Help! He struggled to get out while his body was helplessly sinking deeper and deeper. Oh God, I'm going to die! The idea of dying, which he had never thought about in his life, suddenly appeared in his mind. Snap! Suddenly, someone's hand grabbed the streamer by the collar and lifted him up. Cough, cough! He struggled to breathe as he was forced to the top. He instinctively turned his gaze to his savior. Thank you! Ah! He couldn't finish his words as his body was mercilessly thrown out of the sand. Ah! Here! Take him! Fortunately, the association hunters caught the streamer before he hit the ground. After letting out a heavy breath, he turned around to find the person who had saved him, and he noticed he wasn't the only one being rescued. Ah! 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 From the distance, he could see the people flying through the sky as they had just been thrown like a baseball and getting caught by the hunters of the association. The streamer finally recognized the face of the person who was rescuing them. Hunter Sung Suho. It's Hunter Sung Suho of the Woojin Guild. It was the hunter that had caused the blizzard in the middle of the beach, and he wasn't the only one. The other members of the Woojin Guild soon followed. Lim Do-gyun. Yes, leave the rescuing to me. Surprisingly, Lim Do-gyun, who was an E rank, was rescuing people from the sand vortex faster than any of the other hunters there. Due to his agile legs, he was even rescuing other hunters, all without losing his balance on top of the whirlpool that raged relentlessly under his feet. He is really good at escaping. Suho didn't dare to imagine just what kind of training torture Amut had given Lim Do-gyun all this time. Although thanks to that he was able to concentrate on the battle at the center of the sudden chaos. A sand vortex? Suho didn't care what it was. Iron body technique. Instead, he ran towards the center of the sandy vortex with black aura covering both his legs. Little monarch. I know. At Beru's words, Suho's eyes shone intensely. There was a familiar energy at the end of his glaring gaze. Illusions. An ability most often used by the evil races living in the spirit world. They are demonic spirits. King of the Snowfolk and the Monarch of Frost frowns at the fact that his magic has been broken. Just like Silad's reaction, it seemed that the magic he used had also touched the pride of the demonic spirits hiding inside the sand. Suho shouted as he rushed towards the center of the sand vortex to the demonic spirit's hideout. Silad, tell my mother about Beru's words. He had already delivered said words to Cha-Hae-in. Coincidentally, she had arrived at the heart of the dragon, guarded by the dragon soldiers when she heard him. Right here. What are all these things? Cha-Hae-in and Circa looked with firm expressions at the numerous eggs gathered there. These are dragon eggs, Circa muttered in a groaning voice. Chapter 167, Chapter 166, A Dragon's Nest. This would be an accurate expression to describe the place where the dragon soldiers were guarding the human-sized eggs. They didn't have time to count them one by one because they were trying to fend off the enemies attacking them, but even at first glance, a few hundred eggs could be spotted. Did the dragon soldiers move all of them to one place? I think so. The There's no way the dragons would have all gathered here to lay eggs during the war. It was as they said. It seemed that the soldiers here had gathered the eggs from each hiding place. No matter where their original location may have been, wouldn't that make it easier to protect them? Or maybe it's the instinct of the dragon soldiers. All of a sudden, Circa had a strange question pop into her head. But why would your husband leave all these eggs intact? Leave them? Well, the Shadow Monarch is famous for incorporating his enemies into his shadow army unconditionally when he kills them. Ah! Cha Hae-in also realized something from Circa's words. The souls of countless dragons that died here had already become shadow soldiers that served Sung Jinwoo as their king. Therefore, they wouldn't have any reason to keep the existence of the eggs a secret from Sung Jinwoo. Even if the dragons hid the eggs in secret places before dying, they would still have no choice but to tell him their location once converted to shadows. As Circa said, Sung Jinwoo knew that these eggs were here, so they both came to the conclusion that he must have left them here on purpose. But why? Cha Hae-in eventually found the reason. Ah! The moment she unintentionally touched the dragon egg. Surprisingly, the surface of the egg that seemed hard as stone began to scatter like dust at her touch. Wait, what? Cha Hae-in and Circa's eyes widened. There was nothing inside. How can it be empty? Seeing this, Circa hurriedly made her way to the other eggs and started touching them one by one. Rustle. Crumble. The eggs scattered like ashes into the air without much effort. It was striking just how they managed to maintain their original form. An ashen blizzard filled the tombs of the berserk dragons. These are hollow too. Is that so? Could it be that your husband knew these things were dead and didn't care much about them? Circa's guess was quite plausible. However, Chane still had a serious expression. Circa, is it normal for a dragon egg to be empty even when they die without hatching? Well, so far I don't. As an ice elf, Circa didn't know much about a dragon's biology. There was only one, highly possible, guess that came to mind. Maybe the dragon died before it could be born, and your husband has the souls of these eggs. What if they were all taken in as shadow soldiers? Wouldn't their corpses still be inside the eggs, then? They would. Cha Hae-in was silent for a while at Circa's confirmation. Aside from logical thinking of whenever or not the eggs had been nurtured, the mystery still lingered as to why their exterior looked normal, but they were empty inside. And also, what would be the reason the dragon soldiers were guarding empty eggs? Let's check them all for now. Cha Hae-in and Circa began to test all the remaining eggs. Unfortunately, there was not a single one that stayed intact after being touched. At the same time, Cha Hae-in was also coldly watching the behavior of the dragon soldiers. These eggs are the owners of the dragon soldiers, so why hasn't their number decreased? There was a slight connection, though. As the numbers of the eggs decreased, the bloodlust of the warriors was becoming even more intense. Could they have another owner? Maybe there are still some living dragon embryos around here? Thinking of many various hypotheses, Cha Hae-in continued to reduce the number of eggs. And finally, she found it. Isn't this a bit small? Cha Hae-in's eyes sparkled when she found the ostrich-sized egg hidden among all the human-sized ones. The egg also smelled of unlike all the other hollow ones. When she grabbed it, she could feel it weigh a fair bit. Ah! The aura around the dragon soldiers also became extremely thick. Cha-cha! These guys are getting mad! We have to evacuate. Huh! Suddenly, the shadow wyvern Kaizel, who had been sleeping quietly all this time, suddenly woke up. Kaizel spread his wings wide while stretching on Cha Hae-in's shoulder and yawning. Then he took the real dragon egg into his arms, twisted himself into a coil, and embraced it as if it was his own. Ah! The bloodlust of the dragon soldiers suddenly disappeared in an instant. Cha Hae-in and Circa looked around with puzzled expressions at the sudden change. The soldiers all of a sudden bolted towards them, only to kneel down and lower their heads as they surrounded Cha Hae-in and Circa. To be more precise, they were on their knees in front of Kaizel, who was cuddling the egg. Seeing this, Cha Hae-in and Circa muttered to themselves with bewildered expressions. I guess we can count this as a win, right? Cha-cha, should I pray for this? Yeah, let's tell Suho. It seems they have found the last dragon egg in this entire universe. Little monarch, the entire shore is covered by a whirlwind of sand. Hende was caught in an unexpected natural disaster, as Beru reported. The sandy whirlpool on the ground wasn't the only thing to worry about. There was also a sandstorm in the air that spread in all directions, as if it was a barrier. It's similar to the instance dungeon made by Harmakan, but much more refined. Harmakan, a member of the demonic spirit clan, also placed a barrier around the entire Yami village to create the instance dungeon. The barrier was so subtle that even those who passed through couldn't notice it. He didn't know if this was another kind of magic or the demonic spirits that appeared this time had been clumsy with their spells, but they created an easy-to-spot and obvious barrier that trapped people inside a sandstorm. Sung Suho, a voice called from behind. Lim Taegyu, the guild master of the Reaper Guild and S-class hunter, was running furiously through the sandstorm. "Get out of the way!" he said while knocking magic arrows in the Reaper's bow, then quickly drawing and aiming towards the center of the sandy vortex. Swish! The powerful projectiles grazed Suho as they flew towards the center of the barrier. Kaboom! One of the arrows pierced its target and exploded. "Ah! How dare a measly human being!" Angry screams of the demonic spirit echoed in all directions. "There you are!" Like an eagle that found his prey, Lim Taegyu's eyes sparkled as he unleashed a storm of magic arrows again. Poof! Kek kek kek! Countless skeletons also emerged from the sandstorm to attack him from all sides. He snorted and, while laughing, hit them with the Reaper's bow. Kwang! The S-class weapon was harder than a baseball bat, so he smashed the skeletons with a delightful ease. "That's all I need to kill you! It can't be." Lim Taegyu rapidly scanned his surroundings, hearing an eerie voice right behind him. "You are quite strong for a human." Ignoring all other hunters, the gloomy voice rang only in his ears. "Oh well, it doesn't matter how much mana you have. Humans are a weak race." He laughed at Lim Taegyu. "The human soul is inferior." As soon as he finished speaking, the scenery changed right in front of Lim Taegyu's eyes. The demonic illusionist Javier uses the skill, Mirage. Mirage? Suho gained 2 pieces of information thanks to the system's message. 1. The culprit behind the situation was Javier, a magician from the demonic spirit tribe. 2. He could use a skill called Mirage. Little monarch, beware of the illusions. Beru's urgent voice began to fade far away as the landscape around Suho changed. Javier was a magician from the demonic spirit tribe. He never once doubted his victory. He had to win. He had been experimenting with the souls of the people he collected on this beach, and as a result came to one simple conclusion: humans are weak. The demonic spirits were a race that enjoyed doing various research on the nature of souls. To them, they were just a resource to study, with an infinite potential. Using them, they could create really interesting spells. Although it might be terrible for the victims, Mirage was a powerful illusion that brought out the most terrifying or intense moments from the target's memories. They are quite an interesting race. Through his demonic magic, Javier enjoyed the colorful fears hidden within the human subconsciousness. Since they were fundamentally weak, the fear felt by them was more primal and instinctual than that of the other races. The other species only feared death at best, but look at the humans gathered in front of him. Look at the many colorful fears that they could express. For example, that one. Honey. No, it can't be. Lim Taegyu, who had the most magic power among the hunters, fell into the greatest despair. That was because his dead wife, no, the wife he had killed with his own hands, appeared in front of him. Her dead body was enveloped in a blue flame, burning her away. Slowly she approached him with a sorrowful look on her face. "Why are you looking at me like that? You are the one who killed me." "I'm sorry. I'm really sorry." "Keh! How delightful it is to watch a soul struggle in despair." Javier felt extreme pleasure while he admired Lim Taegyu's despair and fear. "Kaha! They cannot resist their absolute fears. Just look at how beautiful this is." S-class or whatever, inside was just another equally insignificant human soul, while his illusions were on another level. Javier could bring out the intense memories deeply engraved into the victim's soul and turn them into reality. The illusions could even exert physical power on the material world. This moment was bound to come, S-class hunter, so don't struggle anymore and accept your fate. He mocked and giggled at Lim Taegyu, until a sudden chill made him turn his gaze quickly in the other direction. He couldn't help but doubt his eyes. That? What is that? The ominous feeling was coming from the young hunter who caused that blizzard earlier. He, too, had been watching the illusion of a person deeply engraved in his memory manifest into existence. But something was strange. What the hell is that? A being from Suho's memory was slowly revealing itself, covered in the black void of the abyss itself. Chapter 168, Chapter 167. Looking back, Suho's school days were always filled with boredom. Square desks, square blackboards, square classrooms, a uniform world where people wearing the same clothes gathered in one place, all learning the same things. That was all he remembered about his school days. Boring. Looking back, Suho often yawned and felt bored for no reason during those days. Something. A vague feeling that he knew something more exciting and amazing. Whenever he felt that way, Suho couldn't stand the boredom. Suddenly, tick. Time stopped, and an unbelievable sight unfolded before his eyes. Students leaving the school gate, students exercising, cars passing by on the road, people walking on the sidewalk next to it, and even a ball flying through the air. Everything that was once moving stopped instantly, and it appeared. A gate. A round, black hole that suddenly materialized at the back of the classroom. A dark door that seemed to suck you in when you got too close. It was enough to frighten any ordinary child, but instead of crying or screaming, Suho placed a hand on his chest. Thump, thump, thump. His excited heart was beating wildly. Maybe he had been expecting something like this for a long time. Mom always said I resembled Dad. If it were his father, how would he act in this situation? The answer was clear. Suho jumped into the gate without hesitation, and so it began, the most intense and violent dream of his entire life. Kick! Level up! In that dream, Suho was hurt and died countless times. He fought off an overwhelming number of monsters that attacked him while running forward, always forward. And finally, at the end of that dream, Suho was able to face him. A man with his face hidden under a hood. A mysterious persona who exuded an overwhelming sense of intimidation. But now he knew who he was. Father? Suho couldn't help but be bewildered by the sight of his father, Sung Jinwoo, appearing before him. Of course he knew. That was definitely an illusion. His father, who was in space, couldn't suddenly appear here, so that had to be a fake. But he couldn't help but worry. Can I defeat my father as I am now? Gulp, Suho swallowed dryly. Looking back, even at level 99 in the dream, he was knocked out in one hit, and his current level was even lower than back then. No, father won't be as strong as he was then either. That's just a fake created by magic. Suho was certain. There was no way that a mere demonic illusionist could reproduce the power of his father, the Monarch of Shadows. So surely. No, even so, the pressure, it's too much. The relentless aura weighing down on the surroundings. Just how powerful was the magic of the demonic spirit race that Suho's senses had been going haywire since the moment his father's copy appeared. Even though he knew it was clearly an illusion, Suho couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat from the pressure bearing down on his entire body. To think there was someone with such a memory, the Shadow Monarch. Javier, finally regaining his composure, burst into laughter. He had finally grasped the situation. Pointing at Suho, Javier shouted in a confident tone, You must have encountered the Shadow Monarch somewhere. Indeed, the King of the Dead is the personification of terror, a living nightmare. Javier, the demonic illusionist, had briefly seen the Shadow Monarch from a great distance. Of course, he had survived until now only because he ran away without looking back as soon as he spotted him. But even just sneaking a glimpse of him from afar made that day his most terrifying and cursed memory. The aura of death that the Shadow Monarch exuded. It was a tremendous shock. If only he could perfectly extract the fear of that day from his memory. I could have even the mighty Shadow Monarch as my subordinate. Memory manifestation, that was the magic Javier had dedicated his entire life to perfecting. Of course, it wasn't perfect, but even if he could just partially recreate the Shadow Monarch, the King of the Dead, his soul would achieve a monumental level of transcendence. But unfortunately, his spell ultimately failed. Or rather, it was a half success. He had completed the mirage, but the image of the shadow monarch that Javier himself had witnessed was too fleeting. He couldn't create an illusion of the shadow monarch with such a flimsy memory as material. But to discover it this way, he knew that the shadow monarch had been living in the human world for a long time, but to think there was a soul among humans who remembered him in his full glory so vividly. Javier licked his lips, looking at Suho with greedy eyes. "KK, you're mine now. I'll bind your soul and use it as material to summon the illusion of the shadow monarch forever." Then, he gave a cruel order to the shadow monarch, still emanating a terrifying aura. "Kill him! Listen, shadow monarch, I am your master, Javier. Kill the human before you at once and bring his soul to me as an offering." At those words, Suho tensed and drew upon all the magic power within him. "I'll go all out from the start." In truth, the most effective way to deal with a magic caster was to ignore their illusions and target the caster directly. However, mages rarely foolishly exposed themselves. Javier, too, was hiding somewhere, only his voice reaching them. Suho tried to expand his senses to detect his presence, but strangely it seemed to be coming from all directions simultaneously. "Honey, I'm sorry, that with my own hands." Even within the illusion of a woman that Lim Taeju was facing with a pained expression, even within the illusions that countless other hunters were confronting, and even from the shadow monarch, Sung Jinwoo, standing there, "You're quick." Javier's energy was coming from them all. "That's right, all the illusions here are me. And now, even the shadow monarch you summoned is—" Javier's wicked laughter echoed everywhere. But then, "Huh!" A confused shout suddenly came from Javier. At the same time, Suho also noticed something strange. His father. No, the fake Sung Jinwoo. The one who seemed about to unleash an indiscriminate attack with that overwhelming power. He was now looking at Suho's face and chuckling, as if he found him endearing. "You're still weak." For a moment, Suho felt a strange sensation. The demonic spirit's magic was truly amazing. That voice and atmosphere, didn't they feel just like his real father? The problem was that this was the illusion his father that had attacked him in his dream. But then, what? Why isn't he moving according to my will? Javier's voice was greatly flustered for some reason. Sung Jinwoo withdrew his gaze from Suho and looked around leisurely. A fierce sandstorm raged. Within it, the hunters were trapped, struggling against the illusions with pained expressions. Watching the scene, he nodded and spoke again. "I see, so the current me is an illusion." "What?" Javier was in utter shock. Something truly unbelievable had happened. An illusion created by magic had gained self-awareness and recognized itself as an illusion. "This is impossible. Nothing is impossible. At least not for me." At those words, Javier shuddered. Goosebumps rose on his skin. The illusion of Sung Jinwoo was suddenly looking directly at the real him, hidden within the sandstorm, and speaking to him. He chuckled and casually tossed a question at Javier. "Do you know how many demonic spirits have become shadow soldiers so far?" Wait a minute. A sense of foreboding suddenly washed over Javier. It wasn't a question asked out of curiosity. Javier immediately understood the intention behind these words. How many of his brethren had died at the hands of the Shadow Monarch during the fierce war and been incorporated into the Shadow Army? What if those who had become shadow soldiers were still researching magic like they used to, even after their transformity, and the king who ruled over those shadow demons, the Shadow Monarch? Indeed, thanks to them, I've become quite familiar with the magic of the demonic spirits. Sung Jinwoo expressed his sincere gratitude to Javier. "So I applaud you. Your magic is quite useful, especially in a situation like this." Then he suddenly looked up at the sky. Although nothing was visible due to the sandstorm, his gaze calmly pierced through it, towards the universe beyond, towards his true body that existed there. A faint smile formed on Sung Jinwoo's lips. Then he lowered his gaze, looked at his son Suho, and called out someone's name. Beru! At his command, Beru, who had disappeared, suddenly emerged through the sandstorm, and upon recognizing his master, Sung Jinwoo, he burst into tears. "My king!" He was just a mirage. But Beru's eyes, spiritually connected to Sung Jinwoo, could accurately perceive his will through that illusion. "Beru, you've grown weaker." Sung Jinwoo clicked his tongue, recognizing Beru's condition at a glance. Well, no matter. He raised his hand and placed it on Beru's head. Remember this. Shadow soldiers share all senses with their monarch. That's the second level of the shadow storage skill. Then, as if speaking for Suho to hear, he muttered, "If you mix that with the demonic spirit's magic, you can do things like this." Whoosh! A black energy swirled from his hand and seeped into Beru, who closed his eyes in pleasure, finally feeling his master's touch after a long time. At that moment, ding! A quest has arrived. What's this? Suho's eyes widened as a system message suddenly appeared before him. Before checking the quest details, he looked at the illusion of his father, who was grinning at him. That's right, it's a bit primitive, but this is originally how quests were created, the leveling system. It was a high-level magic the great spellcaster Kandiaru for a single purpose. And that purpose was, the reward is the next shadow skill. Sung Jinwoo said to his son with a slightly mischievous smile, "So show me what you're worth. Will you accept the quest?" Chapter 169, Chapter 168 Rumble. Don't be ridiculous. You're just a puppet born from my magic. How dare you defy me? Javier shouted frantically, conjuring a sandstorm to attack the illusion of Sung Jinwoo. "You're mine! Kwang!" The sandstorm transformed into a giant hand, reaching out to grab him. The gesture looked possessive, as if a cherished doll was being snatched away. "Just be my puppet obediently." But the illusion of Sung Jinwoo smoothly floated into the air, effortlessly evading Javier's grasp. He spoke with a relaxed demeanor. "Sadly, I must decline. Also, you won't have time to worry about me from now on." "What? My son just started a quest." His gaze shifted to Suho, who was currently checking the quest details, eyes scanning the description. Emergency quest, prove your worth. The illusion of the Shadow Monarch, Sung Jinwoo, demands proof of his son's worth. Defeat the demonic spirit's magic caster, Javier, and receive a new shadow skill. "Accept," shouted Suho, eyes flashing intensely. Then, without hesitation, he charged towards the sandstorm that was closing in from all sides, trying to reach his father. Skill Storm Slash is activated. Swish! His twin swords whirled in a dazzling display, tearing through Javier's grasp. At that moment, an amazing sight unfolded. The sand scattered from the explosion began to take the shape of countless skeletons. Then, could it be that all the skeletons so far were? As if in response to Suho's realization, Sung Jinwoo nodded. "Yes, that's right. Those skeletons are all illusions created by his magic." It turned out that the monsters that had suddenly appeared in Honde were all created by Javier. Then, they all rushed towards Suho at the same time, with a presence so vivid that it was difficult to believe they were not actually real. No matter how strong you are, do you think you can win against infinitely generated illusions? Illusions with physical substance and power. It was an incredible ability, befitting a great spellcaster of the demonic spirit tribe. Suho, however, showed no change in expression as he watched the skeletons charging at him with ferocious momentum. Divine Possession. The spirit of Pet, Gray strengthens the high priest's body. With a divine wind, Suho's hair turned silver, and his movements became dramatically faster. Sung Jinwoo's eyes momentarily lit up at the sight. Could that be? It was strange. The blessing of the Fang Monarch, whom he had killed himself, resided in his son's body. Skill Grassland's Wind is activated. Movement speed temporarily increased by 30%. Attack speed temporarily increased by 30%. Ruler's Authority. As Suho released the swords he held in both hands, they shot forward like beams of light, slashing through the skeletons. Simultaneously, he unleashed a barrage of punches. Boom! Crack! Crumble! The skeletons were mercilessly destroyed, shattered by the fierce attacks. Dozens, then hundreds of skeletons vanished without a trace in an instant. No matter how numerous they were, or how relentlessly they attacked, these skeletons couldn't even buy time against Suho. Sung Jinwoo, watching the scene, frowned slightly. Observing closely, he sensed not only the energy of the Fang Monarch, but also the energy of the Plague Monarch within Suho's body. How did my son become the priest of dead monarchs? This makes me curious about what happened. His gaze suddenly turned to Beru, who, as if it were natural, had been faithfully guarding his side since earlier. The fierce aura emanating from his narrowed eyes would have been a truly terrifying sight if he were his original size, but the current Beru was too small, making him seem only cute. Sung Jinwoo chuckled and reached for his head again. Beru, I need to look into your memories for a moment. As you wish. Beru willingly closed his eyes and felt Sung Jinwoo's touch on his head. The process didn't take long. I see. After peeking into Beru's memories, Sung Jinwoo tilted his head with a somewhat displeased expression. Then, he suddenly spread his hands in the air and began manipulating Javier's magic circle. Flash! 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 Following his movements, complex magic circles made of ominous light appeared and began to spin. Along with that, the sandstorm that had been sweeping the area started making strange movements and gradually began to change. What are you doing? Javier screamed in panic at the sudden turn of events. His perfectly laid-out magic was being effortlessly distorted. This can't be possible. No matter how hard he tried, once the magic circle left Javier's grasp, it began to warp and distort uncontrollably. Sung Jinwoo offered some words of comfort to Javier. Don't worry. I'm not trying to damage your magic. Even though I look like this, I'm just an illusion with barely any magic power. Then, rumble. Rather than destroying it, I'm trying to enhance your magic. That doesn't make any sense. Javier couldn't help but be shocked. How could a mere illusion do such a thing? What kind of monster have I summoned? He felt an unknown kind of fear that he had never experienced before. Whoosh! Indeed, as Sung Jinwoo said, Javier's magic circles were gradually evolving into a perfect form. Gasp! Javier was greatly bewildered by the sudden feeling of his power being elevated. But regardless of the process, the result was clearly beneficial to him. I don't know what your intentions are, but Javier readily seized the power that he had offered. Then, looking down at Suho, or rather all the hunters including him, he revealed his sinister grin without reservation. I'll gratefully accept this power. Flash! Skill Mirage has leveled up. Rumble! The sandstorm intensified, and the power of the skeletons born from the illusion increased significantly. Now then, my son. The illusion of Sung Jinwoo, looking down from above, crossed his arms with a sly smile. Now that Dad has set the stage, let's see you unleash all your power. Don't worry, Dad will take care of the rest. Suho's eyes widened for a moment, and despite being in the middle of a battle, his gaze instinctively moved to find his father. He realized what those words, the rest, implied. Itarim, the apostles of the Itarim. He had been suppressing his power, knowingly or unknowingly, to not become a burden to his father, to not let his father's enemies know that he was the descendant of the Shadow Monarch. He had been using his most powerful ability, the Shadow Authority, to a minimal extent. The reason was clear, and it had to be that way, for his father's sake, because I am my father's only weakness. But now, his father was. This kid, he's gotten older and his head has grown bigger. Jinwoo clicked his tongue at him, reprimanding him in a tone that seemed to see through all the worries he had been carrying. Seriously, are you so old that you are worrying about your parents? Suho, my son. He was unable to hide the fond and proud smile on his face. Worrying is something parents do for their children. It's the older ones who worry about the youngsters. And as that smile deepened, Sung Jinwoo's presence grew, as if to engulf the entire area. Remember this. He sincerely scolded his son for worrying about him all this time. This father of yours has never lived a single moment carelessly. I'm not so weak that someone young like you needs to worry about me. So, his father's voice resonated in a low tone. Stop needlessly worrying about your dad. The moment he heard those words, Suho felt as if a huge weight had been lifted from his shoulders, and at the same time, he realized the true reason his father's illusion had appeared from Javier's magic. Javier's skill mirage. A magic that showed the terrifying memories deeply engraved within one's mind. The most frightening aspect of this skill was that it materialized and showed the weakest part of a person, their most anxious and vulnerable memories. And as the current result proved, the trauma-like emotion that had been hidden inside Suho's heart all this time was about his father. Because of me, my father. What if my father is held back because of me? If I become a hostage to those guys, it'll be a disaster. I am my father's only weakness. All those countless thoughts had manifested into the illusion of his father. But now, he has received the permission to go all out. Suho's eyes changed. The corners of his lips rose in a smile somewhat resembling his father's, and an expression of utter relief appeared on his face. He stopped walking and looked ahead. Then, with calm eyes, he spoke. Arise. Whoosh! His shadow soldiers rose from beneath Suho's feet all at once, their entire bodies rippling with black smoke. They surrounded Suho and exuded a menacing aura in all directions. Among them were Kui, Harmon, and Kira, who until now had been traveling all over the country hunting villains. Harmon, create an instance dungeon. Yes, master. Flash! As soon as the order was given, Harmon spread his arms and cast a spell. Instance dungeon has been created. Flash! A transparent barrier expanded in all directions, centered around Harmon. The giant sphere pulled the entire sandstorm created by Javier into itself. Everyone, including Javier himself and the hunters, had been captured in it. Interesting. Using an instance dungeon to trap the enemy. Sung Jinwoo nodded, finally finding something interesting. Could this be Kandiaru's? On the other hand, Javier couldn't help but panic, realizing in horror that he was trapped within a magic circle of a far higher level than his own. But that is not the biggest problem. A power similar to the Shadow Monarch's was suddenly emanating from Suho. How can you— No, wait, could you be— Yes. Suho readily answered the question, as if exhaling a breath he had been holding back for so long. I am Sung Suho, the son of the Shadow Monarch. At that moment, Monarch's Domain L1 has been acquired. Suho's shadow dyed the entire ground black. Chapter 170, Chapter 169. A new skill has been acquired. A new shadow skill called Monarch's Domain. Skill, Monarch's Domain, has been activated. The stats of the shadow soldiers fighting on the caster's shadow are increased by 50%. The soldiers standing on Suho's shadow, which had dyed the surroundings black, roared, surrendering themselves to the surging thrill. This power— Javier couldn't help but be shocked. Something unbelievable had happened, impossible. The aura of a monarch, the Shadow Monarch's domain, was unfolding before his eyes. He denied reality. Yes, this must be a trick, a high-level illusion or a mirage. It had to be. It had to be that way. There was a clear reason for it. You can only inherit that power after the monarch dies. But how? But the Shadow Monarch can't die. Why? Because he is the one who rules over death. How can you inherit the Shadow Monarch's power? You're just a mere human. Rumble. Feeling an immense sense of unease, Javier launched a fierce attack on Suho. Sandstorms raged, and illusions with physical substance transformed into menacing monsters, all pouncing on him at once. Facing them, Suho grinned, revealing his teeth. Isn't it possible for a son to resemble his father? He had been able to use the ruler's authority from birth, even though he wasn't a ruler. So what if he could now use the power of a monarch too? Monarch's Domain. It was time to test the effects of his new skill. All forces, advance. Suho gave the order to soldiers waiting for his command. As if waiting for this very moment, his shadows charged forward with tremendous momentum, his shadow army. A small elite force, but far too meager to be compared to the endless legions led by his father. Their numbers were dwarfed even by Javier's illusions now closing in from all sides. But it was enough. One strike, one kill. Shadow Lancer charged forward, her spear becoming a streak of light, slashing through everything in sight. An especially confident smile graced her lips. I bet you all, the soldier who defeats the most enemies becomes the captain. A match to determine the hierarchy. I can't ignore that. Harmakan's eyes gleamed darkly. As the strongest soldier treated as a mere underling, he had to accept the challenge so he could raise his status. Spirits filled with hatred, come to me. He spread his arms and used a new spell. Harmakan uses skill, Provocation of the Damned. Nearby enemies burn with hostility towards Harmakan. Kick! Instantly, all attacks from the nearby enemies began to pour onto Harmakan. Harmakan uses skill Damage Amplification. Harmakan uses Thorn of Pain. Harmakan uses skill Exploitation, and he returned all those attacks back to them. This is cheating. He gritted his teeth and started attacking even more intensely. A mage fighting like a tanker? Boom! Crash! Quang! Meanwhile, the Shadow Minotaurs relentlessly charged through the fierce sandstorm, and with a terrifying momentum trampled their enemies mercilessly. At the center of it all, Suho fully experienced the effects of his new skill. This is the Monarch's Domain, a buff skill that strengthened his shadow soldiers. With this one skill, their combat power had more than doubled. and this effect would undoubtedly create even greater synergy the more soldiers he had. A shiver ran down his spine as he imagined having an even bigger army. Yes, that's exactly. Indeed, it's a legion. As if reading his thoughts, his father's voice suddenly reached him. Looking back, he saw him watching the battlefield where the shadow soldiers were rampaging, a satisfied smile on his face. Now you're finally acting like my son. With a flick of Sung Jinwoo's hand in the air, Suho's status window appeared before him, showing the result of all the efforts and choices his son had made on his own. Sung Jinwoo scanned its contents and nodded. Good choice prioritizing strength first. To gather standing soldiers, you need to be strong yourself. But it was more than sufficient. His strength stat was incredibly high compared to his level. In truth, the leveling system Suho was using was incomplete. This was because the ultimate goal of developing the player into a vessel for the Shadow Monarch had been removed. To have grown this much using an incomplete system without even a job change quest. Just this alone showed how much effort Suho had put in. However, the direction of his growth needed to alter a bit from now on. The entire game had changed just by acquiring Monarch's domain. But there is no need to advise him on this. The path he would walk had to be chosen by himself for it to have value. Now that my son's situation is settled, shall we move on to other issues? As he suddenly turned his gaze elsewhere, his figure suddenly vanished. Hot. So hot. His whole body was burning. But his wife, whom he had killed with his own hands, must have felt this too. Ugh, I'm sorry, I had no choice, to save Dogyun. Lim Taeju was embracing the illusion of his wife, still engulfed in blue flames, and wailing. In truth, he knew that all of this was an illusion, but sometimes one just wants to be deceived. Besides, who knows? Maybe this wasn't a lie, but a summoning of his wife's actual soul. If there was even the slightest chance of that, he felt like it would be okay to die here with his wife. Javier burst into laughter at the sight. This is perfect. Enemy or ally. He couldn't fathom the Shadow Monarch's intentions. The magic circle he had been tinkering with had evolved into a truly perfect structure, and this was the result. Honey, I don't want to die. I need more mana. Whoosh! Engulfed in hot flames, Lim Taeju readily surrendered his magic power at his wife's demands. Srank mana. There was such a vast amount of it that unlike for other hunters, it seemed endless, no matter how much was drawn out. All that was flowing through Lim Taeju's wife, directly to Javier. And the same was happening with all the other hunters caught in the illusion. All this power is mine. Javier trembled with overwhelming exhilaration. Then he gritted his teeth, glaring at Suho, who was mercilessly crushing his illusions in the distance. I don't know what you're up to, but things will be different from now on. Javier finally rose from his crouched position, and he unleashed all the magic power that had been steadily accumulating inside him, activating a magic circle directly on his own body. The demonic illusionist Javier uses skill, mirage. Whoosh! The illusion began to inflate his body, while the corners of his mouth stretched into a sinister grin. I'll show you the greatest fear I can conjure. Javier recalled the being he had encountered while wandering through a dimensional rift, the divine power of that great and terrifying being. I'm excited, too, to see how far I can mimic the great power of that being. Whoosh! Javier's massive body split, and dozens of tentacles sprouted in all directions. His gigantic form finally emerged from the sandstorm, standing before Suho. The demonic illusionist. His name tag also finally appeared. Kraken? Be careful. That form is definitely based on one of the apostles of Itarim. It seems he encountered them somewhere while wandering through dimensions. Beru, who had approached at some point, quickly provided additional explanation to Suho. He's mimicking an apostle of Itarim with an illusion? Suho narrowed his eyes, glaring at Javier, who had transformed into a kraken-like form. The energy he felt was too ominous to dismiss as a mere imitation of simple tricks. He is at least high A rank or even S rank monster level, and still getting stronger. Suho clenched his teeth, sensing the flow of mana in the surroundings. He realized that the real quest, the test his father had given him, was starting now. Can I do it? Of course, it wasn't his first time facing an S-rank monster, but before, he had Louise fought alongside others, and even then, it was with S-rank hunters. but not now. I have to defeat it alone. As the question of whether he could do it appeared in his mind, he realized it wasn't the moment to contemplate such possibilities. The answer had been evident from the start. Without hesitation, his body sprang into action. Clear the path! As Suho charged towards Javier, the shadow soldiers cleared away all the illusions blocking his way, and he leaped along the path they had created. Thump! Thump! He felt his heart race as if it would explode. Tap! 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 He stepped on the air, charging towards Javier. Foolish human. At that moment, giant tentacles struck from above, from a distance impossible to evade. Boom! With a tremendous explosion, the huge limb crushed Suho. Javier laughed triumphantly, but skill, tenacity reduces damage. Suho's body still stood firmly beneath it, and then, grab, Suho's hand seized the giant tentacle. His hand began to grow larger. Whoosh! Skill, Giant's Armor, is activated. Suho's body swelled, and he swung the grasped tentacle with all his might. Whoosh! Boom! Boom! Javier's body was flung through the air and slammed onto the ground. What kind of power is this? Javier cried out in shock, forgetting his pain. The path Suho had walked, the strength even Sung Jinwoo acknowledged. That's right, at least in terms of physical might, he was on par with Thomas Andre, the Goliath, the S-rank hunter called the strongest of humanity. A fist, concentrating all that power into a single point, was raised. Suho's burning gaze met Javier's giant eyes, and he spoke. This might hurt a bit. Skill, Iron Body Technique is activated. A black aura enveloped his fist. And one more thing. Shape transformation, Gauntlet. The Shadow Minotaur wrapped around Suho's fist. Chapter 171. Chapter 170. Boom. Black smoke billowed. A tremendous shockwave rippled out from where Suho's fist landed. Javier's pained screech pierced through the air, the screams emanating from his massive, heaving body, and with that, Suho's relentless assault began. Boom. Thud. Each blow was a heavy attack. Suho's fists, clad in the gigantic gauntlets, began to mercilessly pummel Javier. You bastard! Javier didn't just take the hits. Dozens of giant tentacles lashed out from all directions, fiercely striking Suho's body. But he didn't block, enduring all the monstrous attacks with his bare body, focusing solely on attacking and attacking again. A head-on fight, even the tenacity skill couldn't completely nullify all the pain. It hurt when he got hit. His insides churned. A surge of blood rose in his throat. His HP was steadily decreasing, but Suho didn't stop. He had no intention of stopping his attacks. This was a test. His father was watching. He had been given permission to go all out, to leave the aftermath to his father. So I'll show him how I overcome the challenge he set. Suho tore through the tentacles wrapped around his body with sheer force and continued his attack on Javier even more fiercely. Boom. Strength. And tenacity. A fierce exchange of blows, with neither side giving an inch. The scene was completely different from ordinary hunters' raids. It was like a bloody battle between two monsters. And they had one thing in common. They weren't alone. Skeletons swarmed from all sides, trying to hinder Suho. He ignored them and focused solely on attacking Javier, because his side was employing the same strategy. Whoo! Crash! Key's spear pierced through the air and struck Javier's eyeball. Ah! Enraged, Javier grabbed Quay's body and mercilessly crushed it. Then, bam! The tentacle that had pulverized Quay also ruptured. Harmon uses skill Thorn of Pain on all shadow soldiers. All pain and damage Quay receives is shared with the attacker. All damage taken by the shadow soldiers is reflected. Of course, the results weren't exactly the same due to differences in defense and health, but it still cost Javier a tentacle. Moreover, splat! Javier's wound was forcibly torn open, and black blood gushed out like a fountain. Skill, Damage Amplification, increases the damage taken by the demonic illusionist Javier. Javier gritted his teeth as he tried to stop the bleeding. On the other hand, Harmon mocked him with a wicked grin. Joy and sorrow intersected between the two. You traitor to the demonic spirits. You call yourself a great sorcerer, yet you have no shame. Bam! Suho's attack exploded on his jaw once again. Cuke, you're quite strong, but it's useless, growled Javier through clenched teeth. He was distracted by the unexpected series of events, but that didn't change anything. Thanks to the enhanced magic from the illusion of Sung Jinwoo, Javier was overflowing with confidence. Unleash all your power. The The more you do, the more exhausted you'll become, while my magic power is constantly being replenished. Gah! His maniacal laughter echoed through the sandstorm. I am invincible within this magic circle. Invincible, huh? Suho responded with a grin. He didn't know much about magic like his father, but he could roughly understand. You're continuously extracting magic power from the hunters trapped in the illusion, right? Treating them like batteries? Suho chuckled and continued. That's why I sent most of my soldiers somewhere else. To remove the batteries. Ugh. Countless hunters were struggling, trapped in the illusion. The S-rank Lim Taeju was still embracing his wife and crying, but his hot tears evaporated the moment they flowed out. Due to the relentless heat, he was on the verge of collapse with severe burns all over his body. He wanted to die here with his wife, but his magic power was keeping him alive. Honey, I want to live. I need more mana. And his wife, nestle D in his arms, whispered to him with a gentle smile. I need it. And she tightened her grip on him with both arms, as if she wouldn't let him go until his magic power ran out. Honey, let's die together this time. Lim Taeju thought it was fortunate that he had a lot of mana. As long as any remained, this illusion wouldn't end. He knew that his death awaited him at the end of this path. But even that brought him peace, thinking of it as atonement for his wife. The burning pain in his body was also beautiful. His wife's gentle voice, whispering in his ear, how long had it been? Honey, let's die together. What are you, a broken record? Sk. Suddenly a tongue click came from the empty air, and then a horrible sight unfolded before Lim Taegyu's eyes. Slash! His wife's neck was severed. What? In an instant, Lim Taegyu's eyes widened in shock. Thud! His wife's head tumbled on the ground, so easily. Whoosh! It disappeared in blue flames, as if it was a lie. At the same time, countless cracks began to appear all over his wife's body, which Lim Taegyu was still holding. Then it began to crumble and disappear from his arms. No, no, no. Lim Taegyu knelt in front of her ashes, hands flailing helplessly. In his vacant eyes, a figure slowly materialized. Shadow assassin, Kira. He was looking down at Lim Taegyu, tongue-clicking, with the dagger that had killed his wife dangling in his hand. Pathetic. An S-rank hunter, captivated by an illusion of memory, all for the sake of love. You bastard! The moment the murderer revealed himself, Lim Taegyu's once empty eyes turned bloodshot and filled with rage. His strong hand immediately reached out and grabbed the assailant by the throat. Kira's neck snapped, caught helplessly in his grasp. But even then, he didn't die. As expected of an S-rank. Instead, he mocked him in a calm tone. If you have this much strength left, why don't you go find your son instead of wasting time on me? Lim Taegyu's eyes widened at those words. If yours was like this, what do you think your son's worst memory is? At the mention of his son, the light returned to his eyes, which had been filled with madness. No, Dogyun. He's there. Without hesitation, Lim Taegyu ran in the direction Kira pointed to. The shadow assassin, left behind, watched his retreating figure and shrugged indifferently. Well, there are parents like that too. Why did it feel like only he had bad luck with family? Anyway, good luck catching him. That guy, I couldn't keep up with him. With those words, Kira's body dissolved into thin air once again, and he began hunting the illusions of other hunters, mercilessly killing them, without any regard for the will or emotions of those suffering from them. Lim Do-gyunon was running away, as always, this time from the illusion of his mother chasing him. He ran and ran with all his might, just like when he trained with Amit. Lim Do-gyunon's agility had already far surpassed that of an E-rank hunter, but the illusion he had created was also chasing him at the same speed. The memory of his mother chasing him, always hot on his heels. That image, deeply ingrained in Lim Do-gyunon's memory, was reflected in the illusion. Watching the fierce and endless pursuit unfolding within the sandstorm, Kira gave up on rescuing Lim Do-gyunon early on. He decided it would be more efficient to save other hunters first. So he left Lim Do-gyunon to his father, Lim Taegyu. Oh no. As Kira intended, Lim Taegyu couldn't help but wear a despairing expression when he found his son. How? His son was being chased just like back then, by his own mother. And just like back then, Lim Taegyu was faced with a choice. The situation where he had to kill his wife by himself to save his son. Of course he knew, thinking purely rationally. The answer was the same as back then. Now, it was even easier since it was just an illus, ion of his wife. No, maybe not easier. Even back then, his wife had already turned into a monster. But sometimes, even when you know the answer rationally, it's hard to make a decision. Dogyun. But just like back then, he didn't hesitate. Swish, Lim Taegyu's body shot forward, chasing after his son running far ahead. But what is this? The speed was no joke. How? Dogyun is only an E-rank hunter. The gap was closing, but this was definitely not an ordinary running speed for a lower-class hunter. Kyoke. Worried that Dogyun might finally get caught and killed, he aimed his bow and targeted the heart of his wife's illusion, chasing within a hair's breadth behind his son. No, that wasn't his wife. It's a mist burn. A person turned into a mist burn was no longer human. It was a monster. That's all. Swish. The bowstring was released, and a magic arrow shot out. It pierced the mistburn's heart. Huff! Huff! Finally stopping his run, Lim Dogyunon turned around, gasping for breath. Father? His eyes widened in surprise. Relieved, Lim Taegyu collapsed on the spot, but his eyes were still watching his son. Are you hurt? Along with the rising relief, tears welled up in his eyes for some reason, and another illusion was watching the whole scene from above. Sung Jinwoo was observing Lim Dogyunon with an intrigued expression. To think he would witness something like this. An E-rank hunter. No wonder he feels familiar. He chuckled. Suddenly, his hand manipulated a new magic circle in the air. And then, click. He opened a gate. Would you like to enter the Shadow Dungeon? Chapter 172, Chapter 171. You have entered the Shadow Dungeon, Iron Body Training Ground. Amut, who had been leaning against a wall deep within the pyramid, slowly opened his eyes. An uninvited guest has entered. Whoosh! Suddenly, a dimensional door opened, and an overwhelming presence stepped into the Shadow Dungeon. But why? Despite being an intruder, there was nothing unnatural in the process. He opened the door as if entering his own house and appeared before Amut, completely at ease. Who are you? Amut bared his teeth at the man. The moment the giant crocodile man rose, an immense pressure weighed down on the man. But he seemed completely unfazed by that kind of intimidation. Instead, he looked at Amut with an intrigued gaze and nodded. You are the Krokor Amut, aren't you? Amut hesitated at the strange aura emanating from this man. The man wasn't looking at him while speaking. His gaze rested above Amut's head as if something were there. Could it be you? Amut belatedly noticed that the black energy flowing from the man strangely resembled Sung Suho's, and his eyes lit up. Are you the Shadow Monarch? No, not exactly. To be precise, I am something similar to him. You of all people should be able to tell, right? What? What are you talking about? Amut frowned at the vague answer, but even with that reaction, the illusion of Sung Jinwoo only met his eyes and gave a faint smile. So, magically speaking, I'm a being similar to you. Amut's eyes widened at those words. As if expecting this reaction, Sung Jinwoo calmly turned his head and looked around. His gaze pierced through the magic circles of Kandiaru engraved in this pyramid. Flash! Pat! Pat! After his look, the numerous magic circuits carved throughout the pyramid flickered and emitted beams of light. Could you be? The illusion of Sung Jinwoo, appreciating the results of his short work, opened his mouth. Yes, like you, I am a fake soul manifested by magic. There are nicer terms like avatar or NPC, but in the end, they all mean the same thing. Amut's appearance reminded Jinwoo of the Demon King Baron, whom he had encountered on the top floor of the Demon Castle dungeon long ago. Baron, the monarch of White Flames, the king of demons. He was the only monarch among those Jinwoo had faced who wasn't actually alive. More precisely, Baron had already been killed by the first Shadow Monarch, Ashborn, before encountering Sung Jinwoo, and only his soul was recreated by Kandiaru's magic and used for leveling up by the system. However, the Demon King created in this way was nowhere near his original power. This was because the primordial darkness, the source of the monarch's power, was absent. I'm curious, how long have you been trapped in here? At those black eyes that seemed to see through him, Amut chuckled and opened his mouth. I don't know. I can't tell the flow of time here. Do you want me to kill you? What? Kehe. That's the funniest joke I've ever heard. Amut scoffed self-deprecatingly at those words. And then, bam, he swung his giant arm and smashed the wall beside him. Bricks crumbled, creating a massive hole. But strangely, after a while, the broken wall began to repair itself. See? Amut's eyes met Sung Jinwoo's. Even if you were the real Shadow Monarch, I cannot die, because this place is both my tomb and myself. Magic that automatically repairs itself even after being destroyed, huh? Sung Jinwoo nodded at those words, his gaze deepening. But even if it were impossible for him in this form, bringing death to Amut wouldn't be a difficult task for the real him. However, since he hadn't asked with the intention of actually killing him, the illusion of Sung Jinwoo decided not to interfere any further. It was more important to confirm things about this place first. About this pyramid, which didn't exist in Sung Jinwoo's memory. This place was, so to speak, Kandiaru's legacy. There must have been various experiments in the process of developing the leveling system, and this pyramid was undoubtedly one of them. But what was curious was how this massive magical device ended up inside Sung Suho's shadow, a system that automatically repairs itself even after being destroyed. Jinwoo soon realized the reason. Could it be that the incomplete system, having lost its original purpose, is moving on its own, trying to fix itself? In fact, the leveling system had lost its objective a long time ago, because it had already achieved its goal. In that situation, a new player named Sung Suho reactivated it, and the system began restoration, to its original form. No, to be precise, is it modifying itself to fit the changed circumstances? The original purpose of the system was, of course, to turn the player into a vessel for the Shadow Monarch. But Suho could never achieve that goal. Then what was the system trying to achieve? Could it be creating the job change quest itself? The leveling system was improving itself to achieve Suho's job change. That's what the illusion of Sung Jinwoo was convinced of. All the results of analyzing the existence of the NPCM and the magic circles engraved in this pyramid pointed to that. Upon realizing that fact, he couldn't help but let out a hollow laugh. He was anxious yet excited about what kind of job his son would get. In the end, it wasn't much different from the worries of ordinary parents. I know what I need to do. However, the moment Sung Jinwoo smiled after organizing his thoughts, his body flickered and his form began to disperse, like a radio signal losing its frequency. Amut, who had been watching blankly from the front, chuckled and spoke. You're better than me, to be able to move freely, even for a moment, outside the realm of magic. But it seems that's as far as you can go. Flicker. The illusion of Sung Jinwoo looked down at his flickering hands, as if they were about to disappear any moment, and muttered. I guess so. It's time to go back. I've confirmed everything I needed to. As he gestured in the air, a system message appeared. Would you like to exit the shadow dungeon? Wyan. Seeing him turn without hesitation and walk towards the door that had appeared, Amut asked, But why did you come here in the first place? Why, you ask? I came to see if I could support my son in any way. And were you able to help? Yes, a lot, for example. At Amut's question, the illusion of Sung Jinwoo reached out and touched the air. Flash, with this one gesture, the magic circles engraved in the pyramid began to emit light all at once. Sung Jinwoo spoke to Amut, who stood still as always in the center of it all. Amut, I've linked your soul trapped here to your true soul in the sea of the afterlife, just like my illusion is now. What does that mean? It means you can now become a shadow soldier whenever you want. Sung Jinwoo gave a mischievous smile to Amut, who widened his eyes in realization of what those words meant, and continued. You don't want to rot in this prison forever, do you? In that case, become my son's soldier. But to do that, my son needs to be strong enough to take me in, much stronger than now. Crack! Amut's expression suddenly became incredibly motivated, and he clenched his giant fists. He grinned fiercely, banging his hands together. Leave it to me. I'll triple the intensity of the daily quests from now on. Make sure to give him potions while he trains. Sung Jinwoo felt a bit uneasy at his overflowing enthusiasm, but if Suho could endure that training and take in the real Amut as a shadow soldier, his army would undoubtedly become tremendously stronger than it was now. And one more thing. Snap! As Sung Jinwoo snapped his fingers, the magic circle he had manipulated beforehand began to activate. Rumble. Amut looked bewildered as the entire pyramid suddenly shook as if it were about to collapse. Being one with it, he realized that the pyramid was growing in size. And a black beam shot straight up from its pointed center. The light pierced through the dimensional wall and extended directly towards the distant universe. What are you doing? This is a kind of insurance. It has nothing to do with you, so don't worry about it. With those words, Sung Jinwoo returned to where he had come from. Huh. Amut just stared blankly at the spot where he had disappeared, with a dejected expression. How can a mere illusion possess such power? During his long life, Amut had occasionally thought about something. What if, like the Iron Monarch, the strongest monstrous humanoid, he himself had also participated in the war? Maybe we could have won then. But now he realized nothing would have changed. You have exited the Shadow Dungeon. The moment Sung Jinwoo returned to Suho's side, the battle was slowly coming to an end. Crack! Crunch! Boom! Suho's strong hands tore through all of Javier's tentacles and grabbed the neck of his main body, hidden within the illusion. Kyuk, how can this be? The true form of Javier, the demonic illusionist who boasted so much about his magic, was nothing more than a pathetic skeleton. Between the white ribs, his soul was emitting beams of sinister light. This can't be happening. Javier gritted his teeth and glared at Suho. Thanks to the shadow assassin Kira's efforts, the hunters bound by the illusions were gradually being freed. As a result, Javier's seemingly infinite magic power finally ran out, and his illusions gradually lost their strength. But even after finally grabbing his neck, Suho hesitated to deliver the final blow. The reason was obvious. What are you doing? Finish it. Father. Suho's eyes wavered at the sight of his father, who had approached him at some point. His smile was pleasant, but what came out of Sung Jinwoo's mouth was the same reprimand as before. Just kill him. Don't worry about your dad. Squeeze. Suho's lips tightened as he forced his hand through Javier's ribs and destroyed his soul. Bam! The demonic illusionist Javier has been defeated. You have leveled up. 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 Chapter 173. Chapter 172. Power surged through Suho's entire body. A whopping 5 level-ups. It seemed that the vast amount of magic power Javier had absorbed from other hunters had been converted into experience points and granted to him. Quest completion rewards have arrived. Would you like to check the rewards? Instead of checking the rewards, Suho frantically looked around for his father's illusion. Father? Swoosh! With Javier's death, the sandstorm that had covered the area, along with all the illusions he had created, scattered like dust and disappeared. The illusion of Sung Jinwoo wasn't much different. However, even as his body dispersed and vanished, he remained calm. Don't make such a fuss. I'm just an illusion. Then, he slightly raised his head to look at the sky and continued. The real me is doing well up there, although I've been a little busy recently, since someone has been away. Keek, my king! This disloyal sinner stands before you, seeking your forgiveness. At those words, Beru swiftly prostrated himself and began to wail. I desperately want to return, but I lack the magic power to do so. It's fine. If that's the reason you can't return, then I'm relieved. Although Sung Jinwoo was currently an illusion, his consciousness was linked to his real self through their connected souls. By utilizing Javier's magic in reverse, he had turned his illusion into a kind of avatar, an incarnation of the real Sung Jinwoo. Thanks to this, the real Shadow Monarch in space was now aware that Beru, whom he had sent to Earth, had safely released Suho's seal. He had been worried that the Shadow Ant might have encountered some obstacles and hadn't reached Suho yet, but that concern was now alleviated. More importantly, Sung Jinwoo's gaze fell upon the small Beru, lying flat on the ground, and he spoke. I think it would be better for you to stay on Earth for the time being. But is that all right? Beru's eyes widened in surprise. The war in outer space was fierce, maintaining a delicate balance. Therefore, his absence as a Legion commander would undoubtedly place a tremendous burden on Sung Jinwoo. Without me, the balance of the war. Ah, it's fine. I recently acquired a capable soldier. Beru froze in place, his mouth agape at Sung Jinwoo's shocking answer. Of course, it would be better if you could return quickly, but it seems like things on Earth aren't as easygoing as I thought. Even while speaking those words, Sung Jinwoo's body was already half dispersed. I don't have much time. He turned his head and looked at the remains of Javier, whom Suho had just killed. Only thing left was a skeleton with shattered ribs and a message floating above. Mana is contaminated and cannot be extracted. Looking at the system notification, Sung Jinwoo explained to Suho calmly. Among the demonic spirits, there are occasionally those whose mana can't be extracted. Suho wore a disappointed expression at those words, but as Sung Jinwoo had said, Javier's soul, similarly to the souls of demons, couldn't be extracted. It meant he couldn't be turned into a shadow soldier like Harmon. Anyway, since you can't utilize this one. Sung Jinwoo reached out his dispersing hand and grabbed Javier's soul. I'll make use of it. Swish, Javier's contaminated soul was caught in his hand and forcibly pulled up. Then, as if sensing his impending fate, he began to let out blood-curdling screams. Ka! How dare you! This is impossible. I already told you. For me, nothing is impossible. Sung Jinwoo smirked, looking at the dark shadow struggling to escape from his hand. Javier's soul trembled with intense humiliation. A mere illusion born from his own magic had, in turn, captured his soul. You should know that mages of the demonic spirit race, who have accumulated magic power for a long time like you, are excellent materials for magic themselves. With those words, Sung Jinwoo used Javier's soul to cast one final spell. Swish! Suddenly, a net-like magic circle spread from his hand, tightly binding Javier's struggling soul. Ka! The magic circle began to tighten and compress, becoming smaller and smaller. And as Javier's screams grew fainter and eventually ceased, a fist-sized jewel was held in Sung Jinwoo's hand. Here, a gift soulstone. Suho looked at the jewel his father handed him with a puzzled expression. What is this? Acquisition difficulty. A jewel created by compressing a soul. It's insurance, just in case. Put it in your inventory. Insurance? Yes. Watching you fight makes me concerned about something. Sung Jinwoo looked at Suho's face with a wry smile. He wanted to explain more, but no words came out of his mouth. The future was unpredictable. A son follows in his father's footsteps, but their paths are never the same. His son's future was for him to choose and decide. For now, it's better to cheer him on than give him unnecessary nagging. Sung Jinwoo dismissed the countless words that came to mind. So, Suho. And with his dispersing hand, he grasped Suho's shoulder and said, I leave this place to you. Yes, father. Suho nodded heavily, his eyes burning quietly. Sung Jinwoo, seemingly satisfied with that gaze, smiled faintly. At that moment, his body completely crumbled. And even the hand that had been patting Suho's shoulder scattered and disappeared like light dust. At that moment, the entire sky seemed to collapse. The instance dungeon is being deactivated. Shatter! Harmon's barrier began to disappear. Then, as the boundary crumbled, the figures of the civilians who had been outside the barrier finally appeared. At the same time, the hunters who had been swallowed by the sandstorm returned to the sight of the civilians. And moments later, cheers erupted from the crowd. The monsters are all gone. Wow! There are no skeletons left. Hearing the loud cheers, the hunters finally grasped the situation. They realized that the grueling battle lasting the entire day was over. But the reason why their expressions showed both relief and exhaustion was because they knew all too well that they had done nothing here today. Sung Suho. While they were struggling, trapped in the illusion, only one person was active. That young hunter had fought the boss monster alone and ultimately claimed victory. Everyone had seen it with their own eyes. Hunter Sung Suho, Woojin Guild. As the hunters' gazes all turned towards Suho, standing tall in the center, the civilians' eyes naturally followed, and Beru was very pleased with those awestruck stares. Young master, why don't you wave? Everyone is looking up to you. No need. Suho seemed lost in thought. He couldn't feel good after seeing his father, whom he had met after so long, disappear before his eyes again. But he had no intention of dwelling on these thoughts forever. He had things to do, didn't he? Esil. At Suho's call, Esil, who had been out of sight for a while, waved from somewhere on the beach. Suho, I found it. Everyone had forgotten the purpose of their mission amidst the sudden appearance of the boss monster. but Suho's Woojin guild was still diligently following the objective. "You found the gate?" At Esil's shout, everyone looked in that direction with surprised expressions. "Oh, right. Come to think of it, we were looking for the gate?" They had somehow managed to defeat the boss monster, but Suho's guild was originally just a gate search team, and while everyone was dealing with that boss monster, Esil, the only one away from the scene, had finally found the gate hidden somewhere on this beach. "Well done." Suho finally smiled, seeing Esil waving from afar. Then he turned his gaze to look for the other guild members. "Are you all right?" "Healers, this way." "Medics! Medics!" Healers from the Hunter Association and medical personnel were already rushing around, treating the injured. In particular, their only SR, Ankh Hunter, had noticeably severe burns. But Lim Taegyu himself didn't seem to care about such injuries. Rather, "Please treat my son first." "This is Hunter Lim Taegyu's son?" The medical staff was surprised by his words. Lim Taegyu patted the back of Lim Do-gyun, who had collapsed from exhaustion beside him, and answered with a warm gaze. "Yes, my precious son." He was truly relieved that he was able to save him amidst this terrible disaster. But today was different from that time. His son didn't look at his father with fear like he did back then, and he didn't run away from him anymore. "Do-gyun, are you okay?" "No, I'm not okay." Lim Do-gyun simply got up, holding Suho's hand with a relieved expression. Then, he extended the other hand to his father and said, "How about you, father? It must have hurt a lot." "This kid. Who's worrying about whom?" Lim Taegyu chuckled, seeing his son worried about his burns, and got up, taking his hand. The inside of the gate Esil had discovered was already empty. It seemed like Javier had devoured all the living creatures within it. Still, the amount of dungeon minerals inside was considerable, and the ownership of all these resources went to Woojin Guild, led by Suho. Of course, this wasn't stipulated in the contract, but it was thanks to Lim Taegyu relinquishing all the rights he was supposed to receive. However, there was one problem. Time. With all the monsters gone and the boss monster dead, the time this gate would remain open was extremely short. To mine the ores and get out within that short time, a tremendous number of miners needed to be deployed at once. But that wasn't a problem for Woojin Guild at all. Arise. Countless shadow miners rose from Suho's shadow all at once. They rushed into the dungeon with pickaxes and shovels, starting to mine the ores at an incredible speed. "This is unbelievable." Witnessing the marvelous sight, Lim Taegyu's jaw dropped. He knew Sung Suho was a summoner, but had no idea he was capable of summoning so much at once. He then approached Lim Taegyu, and earnest negotiations began. "Do you have any spare dungeons in the Reaper's Guild? The more dangerous, the better." Now I understand why Do-gyun became so good at running away. That's Chapter 174, Chapter 173. Suho immediately began negotiations with Lim Taegyu. Originally, his plan was to buy back at a low price the dungeon raid licenses that the Reaper Guild, struggling with a lack of manpower, couldn't handle. However, there was a significant obstacle. Their financial situation was much worse than Suho had anticipated. Lim Taegyu had already sold off all the licenses his guild possessed. "So you're saying there really aren't any left?" "Yes. Not even one? I told you so." Lim Taegyu explained the situation with an embarrassed expression. "Our guild decided to operate as a small mercenary group for a while. Most of the money from selling the raid licenses went into equipment." Suho flinched slightly at this part. The A-rank weapon Lim Taegyu had lent him before going to the Glacier Dungeon, the Reaper's Bow, replica, had been taken by Circa, the ice elf who left with his mother, and there was no way to return it. Fortunately, Lim Taegyu had no intention of asking for the bow back. He had lent it to Suho in the first place because his son was a member of Woojin Guild, and he wanted to ensure his safety, even if only slightly. He had been willing to keep lending it as long as Lim Do-gyun was in the guild. "Well, this works out well. Now that you're a guild master too, let me give you a brief explanation of guild management. Do-gyun, you're the vice president, so listen carefully too." Lim Taegyu gave them some very practical advice. The main point he emphasized was, of course, money. Monopolizing an entire dungeon requires a significant amount of investment. The biggest expense is, without a doubt, the raid license. In other words, to win the fierce bidding wars between guilds, the more funds they had, the better. But buying the raid license isn't the end. You have to recoup your investment from that dungeon, right? And that requires even more money. Labor costs? Yes, you catch on quickly. It seems you're no longer a newbie. Lim Tae-ju nodded and continued his explanation. Labor costs. Or in other words, the cost of hiring external contractors like mining and collection teams was also quite significant. Of course, most of those people were E rank or D rank, so their fees weren't high. But there weren't just one or two of them, and more importantly, you have to pay those people their daily wages in cash when they finish their work. But if the guild's funds are tight because of buying the dungeon raid license, you might not be able to afford hiring contractors. No matter how great a hunter was, cash didn't just magically appear as soon as they entered a dungeon. Only after selling the monster corpses, magic stones, and minerals obtained from the raid would the money be deposited into their account. But even after mining the materials, they couldn't sell them right away. It took at least 2 days for everything to go through, and sometimes several more. From here on, it's the realm of real business, completely separate from monster hunting. His explanation was entirely correct, but Suho didn't need to worry about such things. From now on, his uncle, Jinho, would handle such miscellaneous tasks. But there was a reason why Lim Tae-ju was bothering to explain all this. It seems you don't need to hire contractors like the other guilds. While wearing a deeply dejected expression, his gaze turned to Suho's shadow soldiers, who were mining frantically. Bam, 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 krong, 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 krong. Second group, I can see you're slacking. If we fall behind the first group in quantity, I'll kill you myself. Keek! How dare the eternal second-in-command try to stand up to me? Said Beru with a bewildered expression. Keuk! That damn second-in-command. Kui and Beru were supervising the shadow miners, engaging in a mining competition. Lim Tae-ju couldn't hide his dejected expression at the intense and impressive scene. I knew you were a summoner, but I never imagined your skills were this impressive. While his own guild was failing in real time, the sight of this one flourishing was simply disheartening. But it was a complicated feeling, a mix of jealousy and pride, since his own son was Woojin's vice president. Of course, if he found out that Quay, who was mining enthusiastically in front of him, was the one who ruined him, he might cough up blood on the spot. Sometimes ignorance was bliss. But could Suho conjure this many summons before? He couldn't help but wonder. Could he have been hiding his power back then? He had no reason to, though. Lim Tae-ju hadn't yet reached the realization that Suho was a special hunter who grew stronger through leveling up. Such a thing was far beyond the realm of his imagination. Suho nodded and asked, "So you're saying you really don't have any raid licenses left? Then, could you do me another favor?" "What kind of favor?" "Woojin Guild currently has 1 billion won in funds. Since we're already in Busan, could we buy a dungeon from the Knights Guild with this money?" "You're asking me to act as an intermediary? That won't be a problem." Lim Tae-ju readily nodded at those words. In fact, they might be hoping for the same. His prediction was accurate. Lately, there have been quite a few troublesome dungeons in Busan. That's why even the Knights Guild was experiencing a manpower shortage severe enough to hire several mercenary groups, including the Reapers. Therefore, they would likely be able to acquire the dungeon raid license at a fairly low price. "But are you sure about this?" "About what?" "All the reporters in Busan are flocking to Hyundai, wanting to interview you because of this incident, and even the Busan city government is—" "Ah, that's fine. It's not a big deal." Suho shrugged nonchalantly. "Thank you so much." Park Jong-soo, the president of the Knights Guild, was shaking Lim Do-gyun's hand with a bright smile. Thanks to the efforts of Woojin Guild, this incident was resolved smoothly. Woo! Cheers erupted, directed mainly at him. On behalf of the city of Busan, I present this plaque of appreciation to Vice President Lim Do-gyun of Woojin Guild as proof of our gratitude for resolving this incident. Lim Do-gyun was bewildered as he received the reward from the mayor of Busan. Flash, 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 flash! Camera flashes exploded from all directions, blinding him. Who am I? Lim Do-gyun thought to himself. If someone asked, I would answer that I'm the vice president of Woojin Guild. Where am I? Busan City Hall. In the middle of a ceremony awarding a plaque of appreciation, the center of all the spotlight. Haeundae, the beach in front of Busan, was one of the core areas of the city. If it collapsed, Busan could suffer economic damage in many ways. So when Woojin Guild, which had resolved that dangerous situation, said they would specially stay and help raid more dungeons in Busan, even the mayor of Busan personally appeared to express his gratitude. Of course, the plaque of appreciation they received was a useless item that couldn't even be sold in the second-hand market. But it had its own significance. Woojin Guild was now officially recognized by the mayor of Busan as a trustworthy guild and could operate freely within the city. It seems President Sung Suho is very busy. Since the award ceremony is over, shall we move to our office? We have the contract regarding the dungeon raids ready. Yes. But I heard that Vice President Lim Do-gyun is Hunter Lim Tae-gyu's son? You're quite handsome, just like your father. Lim Do-gyun, suddenly surrounded by high-ranking officials, followed the Knights Guild master with a lifeless expression. His energy was being drained in real time. Meanwhile, a crisis of a completely different nature was looming over Suho. What the? Once he had entered the Shadow Dungeon for his daily quest, he couldn't help but be startled. Amit, his gym coach, the master of the iron body. Can you feel the difference in pup? Ower was twice as big as usual. The pyramid was bigger too, and for some reason, an ominous black beam of light was shooting up from the top. But the biggest problem was that Amit wasn't just bigger. Rumble. Then let's begin the training. Wait a minute, the atmosphere feels a lot different from usual. Don't worry about it. I already got permission from your dad. Permission from who? He was worried. The state of the gravitational field pressing down on his entire body was also very ominous. At that moment, Beru, standing at a distance, nodded with a very pleased smile. Hardships in youth are worth seeking out. The rewards will surely be. The rewards are the same anyway. Suho grimaced and started doing push-ups. Crack! And both his arms broke instantly. Whirl. Then bandages flew in and wrapped around his limbs, and today's training officially began. Ka! Thus began the torture. No, training that was twice as intense as usual. Skill, tenacity has leveled up. Physical defense, 140%, 160%. The tenacity skill, which had been silent even during the hand-to-hand combat with Javier, leveled up in an instant, and a while later. Suho, who sprawled on the floor like a rag, limbs tattered, received his rewards. The following rewards are available. Reward 1, status recovery. Reward 2, stat points 5. Reward 3, random boxes. The rewards increased? The daily quest, which originally gave +3 stat points, now gave +5. And there were 2 random boxes, but for some reason he wasn't grateful at all. Chapter 175. Chapter 174. Afterwards, the Knights Guild handed over the raid licenses for 3 mid-level dungeons in the Yeongnam region, including Busan to Woojin Guild in exchange for 1 billion won. The fact that they gave them up for so cheap showed how grateful they were to Suho for his help. Moreover, the Knights Guild even offered an unprompted favor. I noticed that Woojin Guild doesn't have a healer yet. While you're active in Busan, we'll provide you with one of our most skilled ones. A healer? No, there's no need to go that far. Lim Do-gyun, buried in the contract Suho had handed over, initially tried to decline President Park Jong-soo's offer. However, Lim Tae-gyu, who was helping with the contract process, readily accepted the proposal. Is that skilled healer you mentioned perhaps Hunter Lee Juhee? Yes, that's correct. Oh, Lim Tae-gyu looked quite surprised. Then, he whispered in Lim Do-gyun's ear. Definitely accept. Hunter Lee Juhee will be a great help, in many ways. Huh? In many ways? Lim Do-gyun was puzzled. Lim Tae-gyu, without even waiting for his son's reply, stepped forward and grabbed President Park Jong-soo's hand with a grin. Thank you for your consideration. As expected of the Knights Guild's reputation, you even take care of such minute details. Oh no, it's nothing. Hunter Lee Juhee volunteered herself. As expected of her. Lim Do-gyun was still confused, unable to grasp the situation. Anyway, it means the Knights Guild is giving us a discount on the dungeon and providing a healer, right? It was proof of how valuable Haeundae, which Suho had saved, was to Busan. And so, Woojin Guild, led by Suho, officially began its activities. However, not all hunters were as welcoming as the Knights Guild. Hey, did you hear? The Knights Guild handed over 3 mid-level dungeons to Woojin Guild, and at a bargain price too. Seriously? Then why did they compete so fiercely with us in the bidding? No matter how much they contributed in Hyundai, this is unacceptable. If they were short on manpower from the start, they shouldn't have claimed the dungeons, or at least they should have given our guild a chance first. If the Knights Guild had done their job properly in Hyundai in the first place, there wouldn't have been any need to bring in mercenaries from outside, right? As expected, large guilds are all about size, not substance. Complaints began to erupt from the small and medium-sized guilds in Busan that had been overshadowed by the Knights, the largest guild in the region. It was a kind of territorial dispute. But their complaints weren't entirely baseless. The Hyundai incident that the Woojin Guild resolved. Countless people had witnessed this serious situation firsthand, but hunters from other guilds were busy raiding other dungeons at the time. So most of them only learned about the incident later through the news. A disaster seen through a screen couldn't have the same impact as one witnessed in person. And now, with news of even the mayor of Busan personally presenting a plaque of appreciation, they couldn't contain their anger. Seriously, what the hell is Woojin Guild that they're causing such a fuss? They're a new guild with only 3 members, right? Geez, the guild master is a C-rank hunter, and the vice guild master is an E-rank? That's ridiculous. So what did they actually do? That foreigner named Esil found the gate's location at the end of the video. They say Suho defeated the boss monster, but the video doesn't show how he did it. The fact that the main battle took place inside the instance dungeon created by Harmon fueled their dissatisfaction. And as a result, hold on, there were people blocking the way of Woojin Guild who had rightfully purchased a mid-level dungeon and arrived at the gate to raid it. Suho looked at them with a puzzled expression. They were unfamiliar faces. Guildmaster, Lim Do-gyun quickly whispered in Suho's ear. They're famous hunters in Busan. Their names are... What's the matter? Suho asked them while listening to Lim Do-gyun's explanation. Then, the massive hunter in the middle of the group stepped forward with a hostile expression, baring his teeth. Hey! Just a moment. Hunter No Jungi, you can't do this here. This dungeon belongs to Woojin Guild. The Hunter Association staff from the Busan branch, who were managing the gate, were flustered and blocked the hunters who had suddenly intruded. Then, the massive hunter, No Jungi, glared at the association staff who were stopping him. I know. Do you think I can't read? His gaze briefly flicked towards a nearby sign. Entry prohibited except for Woojin Guild. Gritting his teeth, he glared at the association staff again with a hostile aura. Is this allowed by the association? Excuse me. What do you mean? I'm asking if it's okay for the association to break its own rules. No Jungi scanned each member of Woojin Guild one by one. Guildmaster Sung Suho, Lim Do-gyun, and Esil. Ha! This is ridiculous. Just 3 people? Since when was it acceptable to raid a mid-level dungeon with such a small number of people? That's right. The minimum number of raiders is at least 10, isn't it? This is a clear violation. The other hunters No Jungi brought along also chimed in, raising their voices as if they had been waiting for this moment. They came prepared. Suho chuckled at the sight. Hunters' protests were on a different level compared to those of ordinary people. With No Jungi at the forefront, they channeled their mana, expressing their discontent, causing the surrounding air to tremble ominously. Please calm down for a moment. The problem was that the association staff who had to endure this energy were non-awakened office workers. They were struggling to even breathe under the pressure emanating from No Jungi and the other hunters. It was then, sorry, I'm a bit late. The B-rank healer Lee Juhee, sent by the Knights Guild, arrived at the scene. Huh? The heavy air instantly lightened, and the hunter's energy disappeared as if by magic. Hunter Lee Juhee? Miss Lee Juhee, what brings you here? They recognized her, and their eyes widened in surprise. Ah, it's been a while. I'm so glad to see you all looking healthy. As Lee Juhee bowed in greeting, flustered, they waved their hands dismissively. Oh, Miss Lee Juhee, what are you doing? We should be the ones greeting you. Have you been well, Miss Lee Juhee? I heard you joined the Knights Guild, but what brings you here? Ah, I heard Woojin Guild doesn't have a healer, so I came to provide support for a while. Suho's eyes lit up. With Lee Juhee's sudden appearance, the situation began to take an unexpected turn. Guildmaster Sung Suho, I apologize for being late. Lee Juhee approached Suho and apologized politely once again. No, it's all right. You're only a few minutes late. And actually, there's something else I'm sorry about. On my way here, I came across a traffic accident scene, so I used some of my mana to heal the emergency patients. Lee Juhee apologized sincerely once more. It was a grave mistake for a healer to waste magic power before a dungeon raid. However, if the reason was to save emergency patients, no one who knew Lee Juhee's usual character could criticize her for it. Ah, you haven't changed. As expected of Miss Lee Juhee. Ahem. Especially, the hunters in Busan, who had once received free healing from her when they were newbies with no money or connections, remembered her very well. Lee Juhee, who had been active as a freelance healer until relatively recently, had been indiscriminately healing the injured since the beginning of her career. It was no wonder she was called the Saint of Busan. Ahem. Kyohem. The hunters, who had come in full of anger, now hesitated in front of Lee Juhee with awkward expressions. Ah, so this is what he meant by being helpful in many ways. Lim Do-gyun finally understood what Lim Taeju had said, seeing the atmosphere shift. But still, No Jungi closed his eyes tightly and spoke again. Illegal is illegal. The other hunters, avoiding Lee Juhee's gaze, also raised their voices once more. The minimum number of raiders is a rule set by the association. The limit on the number of people was a safety measure for hunters. It was a rule established by the association to prevent hunters from recklessly entering dungeons and losing their lives. How can you sell such a dangerous dungeon to a small guild like this? Ah, you don't have to worry about that. Hugh? Finally realizing the situation, Lee Juhee smiled brightly and quelled their complaints. It's true that there's a minimum number of raiders, but when that rule was created, Chairman Wu Jingchul of the association specifically included an exception. What is it? Looking at the frowning hunters, Lee Juhee suddenly had a thought. Chairman Wu Jingchul, a remarkable figure who had always taken extraordinary steps since the cataclysm. Could it be that his foresight had anticipated even a situation like this from the beginning? The number of summons is also included in the raid party count. As soon as Lee Juhee finished her explanation, Suho spoke up as if he had been waiting. Arise. At that moment, shock filled the eyes of all the hunters. Countless summons rose from the ground, centered around Suho. The powerful aura emanating from the shadow soldiers, their entire bodies rippling with jet-black smoke, exploded in all directions. Overwhelmed by their fierce presence, No Jungi, who was at the forefront, flinched and almost stumbled backward. But suddenly the small ant, Beru, poked his head in front of No Jungi's face and unleashed an incredibly ferocious aura. Eep! Thud! No Jungi fell on his butt. Well then, Suho turned away from them, dumbfounded and seated on the ground. He looked at the gate in front of him, shimmering with an ominous blue aura, and gave a faint smile. Shall we begin? Level up. It took Woojin Guild only 3 days to conquer all the mid-level dungeons they had acquired, including the time spent mining. This is unbelievable. Their astonishing speed shocked No Jungi and all the other hunters in Busan. And around that time, in the United States, I should let Sung Suho know about this. Thomas Andre, the president of the Scavenger Guild and the strongest S-rank hunter in the United States, leisurely took out his phone. Thomas? Oh, you picked up right away. Hearing Sung Suho's voice from the other end, Thomas Andre grinned and said, You've become quite famous in Korea these days, haven't you? We're both busy, so let's get straight to the point. A subtle light shimmered around Thomas Andre as he spoke on the phone. First of all, your mother said she found something in the tomb of the Berserk dragons and asked me to pass it on to you. Laura also got a high-grade magic stone, so I sent them together. They should arrive soon. Cha-hae-in, who had decided to stay longer in the tomb of the Berserk dragons, had arranged to send the items through the Scavenger Guild, which was working on Facade Island. And also, Thomas Andre glanced at the corpse he was holding by the collar with his other hand, the one not holding the phone, and continued. I just killed an apostle of Itarim. The ground where he was standing had a massive crater, as if a meteorite struck there. The corpse he was holding crumbled into pieces and scattered like ashes. Swish, and the ashes transformed into light particles and seeped into Thomas Andre's body. Who was it? Just as we suspected. Absorbing the power, Thomas Andre looked at the face of the hunter he had killed. Christopher Reed. He was a man who had been a national-level hunter in the United States in his past life. Chapter 176, Chapter 175. In the past, before the Shadow Monarch Sung Jinwoo turned back time on Earth, there existed hunters who held the title of the strongest, a title given to only 5 individuals worldwide. National-level hunters. This title literally symbolized absolute power, where one person's authority rivaled that of an entire nation. It was a glorious title bestowed only upon hunters possessing immense power that couldn't even be measured by the term S-rank. However, the reason these 5 were given such a grand title was far from glorious. Humanity's worst disaster. The first S-rank gate and the boss-level monster that emerged from it. The dragon Kamish. This red dragon was a monster of tremendous power, capable of wiping out the entire western United States upon its dungeon break. At the time, the USA offered massive rewards and summoned the strongest hunters from around the world, just barely managing to kill Kamish. In the end, only 5 survived. A single monster had killed almost all the world's top hunters. If it weren't for their sacrifice, the country of the United States would surely have been erased from the world map. Therefore, the USA promised to treat those 5 who saved their nation's fate not as individuals, but as nations themselves. And this is said to be the origin of the term national level. But there was one curious fact here. National-level hunters had something in common. Well, to be exact, 4 of them, excluding the healer from the Kamish raid, all possessed the same skill. Telekinesis, the ability to exert force on an object without physical contact. There had been many strong individuals before and after the Kamish raid, but only these 4 in history possessed such an ability. So the Hunter Management Bureau, at the time the only ones aware of their common trait, even considered telekinesis as a requirement for becoming a national-level hunter. But now, many years later, Suho knew the true nature of the telekinesis they possessed. Skill ruler's authority. That power was none other than the result of the rulers dwelling within the bodies of those ordinary S-rank hunters. In other words, the 4 hunters had become national level only by borrowing the power of the higher beings. They, who possessed vessels capable of accepting the rulers, were the most likely to be taken over by the apostles of Itarim this time as well. Just like Thomas Andre in the Glacier Dungeon. Thomas Andre, you are under arrest for the murder of Christopher Reed. While he was on the phone with Suho, numerous fully armed hunters had approached and surrounded him. The United States Hunter Bureau, the most powerful organization in the U.S., had been dispatched to stop Thomas Andre's rampage. However, despite being vastly outnumbered, it wasn't him who was feeling tense. Hold on a second. As you can see, I'm in the middle of an important call. Thomas Andre gestured casually towards the people surrounding him and continued his conversation with Suho leisurely. Gulp. On the other hand, the Bureau's hunters, who had completely encircled him, wore determined expressions. The person they were trying to arrest was none other than the United States' strongest hunter. That person had killed Christopher Reed, was also one of the S-ranks representing the United States. Why would someone like Thomas Andre suddenly do something like this? There's nothing to gain from killing an S-rank hunter. With the effort he put into this, he could have earned astronomical amounts of money by entering a dungeon. Why? The Hunter Bureau, unaware of Itarim, couldn't help but be bewildered by Thomas Andre's sudden actions. It wasn't that there had never been fights between S-rank hunters before, but it was unprecedented for them to fight to the death like this. This was because the creation of the hunter ranking system eliminated the need for hunters to engage in meaningless power struggles. How many more dangerous monsters they had hunted, how many more dungeons they had conquered. The hunter ranking, which converted these various experiences into points, was the only indicator recognized worldwide. So hunters, instead of wasting their energy on fights they didn't even earn money from, started focusing more on dungeon raids. But why? No matter how much they thought about it, they couldn't understand why Thomas Andre had suddenly killed Christopher Reed. It was then, Thomas Andre. Suddenly, the hunters parted to the left and right, and a man walked through the gap, an elderly gentleman with neatly combed hair. Surprisingly, unlike the other hunters, he wasn't armed at all. "Chief, it's dangerous." "Ah, it's all right." He waved off his subordinates who were trying to dissuade him from his reckless action, step by step. He walked towards Thomas Andre. Even the Goliath himself couldn't help but pause the call at his appearance. Adam White. Recognizing his identity, Thomas's lips curled up in amusement. "To what do I owe the pleasure of the Hunter Bureau Chief's visit?" "Thomas Andre, please cooperate with the investigation." At those words, Thomas Andre's grin widened even further. "And what if I refuse?" He chuckled, revealing his teeth. Despite his provocative words, Adam White, the chief of the Hunter Bureau, only sighed softly instead of raising his voice. His gaze swept over the completely devastated land around them. Just a few hours ago, Christopher Reed's luxurious mansion stood here. But now, it's like a nuclear bomb went off. Is this what happens when two S-rank hunters fight? The saying that S-rank hunters were like walking weapons was definitely not an exaggeration. Adam White gave a wry smile and politely asked Thomas Andre once again, "If you refuse, what can we do?" "We'll just have to ask you more earnestly. Everyone here is someone's precious child or parent. I also have a wife and children to take care of." Huh. At Adam White's words, Thomas Andre let out a sigh, as if the air had been let out of him. "You're still a boring guy. Despite what you see, I'm usually considered a funny guy. That's probably just a facade for appearance's sake. Even my subordinates burst into laughter whenever I crack a joke." Even despite watching the two exchange light-hearted banter, the hunters surrounding Thomas Andre weren't able to even breathe properly. They knew if Thomas Andre were to, for whatever reason, show any signs of aggression and the situation escalated, they would never see the sun rise again. A brief silence fell, and Thomas Andre's and Adam White's gazes met in the air. To some, it was just a fleeting moment, but everyone here felt like an eternity had passed. "Well, all right." Thomas Andre finally chuckled and raised both hands in surrender, and the corpse of Christopher Reed he had been holding this whole time dropped to the ground with a thud. Crumble. Surprisingly, the moment it touched the ground, it broke into pieces like burnt charcoal. Everyone's eyes widened at the sight. But they also let out sighs of relief, realizing they wouldn't have to fight the person that did this to one of the most powerful hunters in the U.S. As if nothing happened, Thomas Andre spoke to Suho on the phone again. "You heard that? Well, that's how things turned out. So, I won't be able to handle guys from other countries for a while." "Other countries?" Adam White's face turned pale upon hearing those words. Seeing his surprised look, Thomas Andre grinned and added another comment for Suho. "It was okay with Chris since he was American, but other countries are a bit trickier because of political issues." "Ah, I see. That makes sense." Suho agreed and nodded on the other end of the phone. The people who had been national-level hunters in their past life were still S-ranks now. For someone like Thomas Andre to go to another country to deal with them was practically equivalent to the United States declaring war on that nation. "That's all I had to say. I'll send you detailed information about Christopher Reed separately." "All right. Thanks for hard work." Click. The call ended. "May I ask who you were talking to?" In response to Adam White's question, Thomas Andre grinned and slung his muscular arm around his shoulder. "Adam, since we meet again after so long, how about buying me a burger on the way? I'm starving after using all that power." "I'll buy you a combo." "Haha. As expected of the chief, you're generous. Buy some for the guys behind us too while you're at it. They all look a bit pale." "All right." Adam White smiled wryly and agreed to all demands. Thus, after Thomas Andre was willingly arrested by the Hunter Bureau, his secretary Laura visited Korea with the gifts she was supposed to deliver to Suho. "Laura, how's Thomas doing?" "You don't have to worry about our boss. He's the type who thrives wherever he goes." She responded nonchalantly to his concern. From the U.S. perspective, keeping Thomas Andre locked up for too long was not profitable. If the income an S-rank hunter earned from dungeons decreased, the corresponding tax revenue would also decrease. Also, considering the country's safety if some dungeon-related disaster happened, the U.S. government had no choice but to pressure the Hunter Bureau to release Thomas Andre. It wasn't like he had massacred civilians. He had only killed a hunter of the same class. In fact, with one less S-rank hunter, he had become even more essential. Besides, our boss never intended to kill Christopher Reed in the first place. He actually visited him to present our flagship product, the Detox Potion. The spring water from the Echo Forest. The antidote obtained from the Holy Land of the Ice Elves was so effective that it could even restore Thomas Andre's mind, which had been possessed by an apostle of Itarim. They wanted to give it to other hunters who had been national level in their past life to prevent similar incidents. That was the plan Suho and Thomas had devised from the beginning. But there seems to have been a slight accident in the process of delivering the detox potion to Christopher Reed. A slight accident? Suho made a dumbfounded expression at those words. He couldn't imagine what kind of slight accident could lead to the death of an S-rank hunter. I also brought a report related to that, so it would be faster for you to see it yourself. But remember, it's classified information from here on. Laura handed Suho a USB drive, and she also had the staff bring the other items she was originally supposed to deliver to Suho. A moment later, 2 sturdy special bags appeared before him. Are these the ones? Yes. This one contains the high-grade magic stones you requested, and this one contains the item found in the Tomb of Berserk Dragons. Suho was silent for a moment, looking at the large bags Laura had handed him. Young master, I sense an unusual energy. Beru, who had appeared beside him at some point, also had a cautious expression. Click. Suho opened the bag from his mother first. Of course, Cha-Hain had already informed him about its contents. A dragon's egg. Finally, the bag was opened, and inside, as he had been told, was an item about the size of an ostrich egg. But the problem was the system message that popped up the moment Suho's hand touched it. Ding. Item, Kamish's egg, acquired. Chapter 177. Chapter 176. Kamish's egg? Beru exclaimed in surprise, causing Suho to ask with a puzzled expression. Why? Do you know that name? Of course I do. Kamish is... Beru passionately explained everything about the red dragon. After hearing the whole story, Suho nodded. I see. So it's the egg of the dragon my father encountered when he was young. Yes, Kamish was one of the prisoners captured by the rulers during the monarch's war with them, so this must be an egg Kamish laid before going to battle. Maybe. Listening to Beru's explanation, Suho had a strange feeling. Perhaps the dragon that hatches from this egg will become the successor to the Dragon Emperor, he mused. With all he had experienced, such a possibility didn't seem far-fetched. Laura, who had been listening to Suho and Beru's conversation, relayed what Cha-Hain had said when she handed over Kamish's egg. Miss Cha-Hain suggested putting this in the Shadow Dungeon. That would definitely be wise. Suho nodded in agreement. Cha-Hain had pondered a lot about how to handle this egg after finding it in the Tomb of the Berserk Dragons. It felt wasteful to just break it, but leaving it in its original place was out of the question. In the end, she thought of Suho's Shadow Dungeon. She thought that no matter what kind of monster hatched from this egg, everyone would be safe as long as it stayed in the Shadow Dungeon. It was a good idea. Thank you for letting me know. I think I'll do as my mother suggested with this egg. Suho expressed his gratitude to Laura, who then opened the second bag she had brought. And this is the high-grade essence stones you requested. Suho and Beru's eyes lit up at the same time. Unexpectedly, there wasn't just one high-grade essence stone inside the bag. You got 3? Yes, of course, it wasn't easy. Since the number of high-grade essence stones available on the market is so limited, the bidding competition was quite fierce. 2 years into the cataclysm, the hunter industry was still in its early stages, and there were countless things to develop, so there was always a thirst for resources. Especially high-grade essence stones obtained by hunters from dungeons were truly rare items. They were snatched up by the scientific community or the hunter industry as soon as they appeared on the market. so naturally their prices were also quite high. They must have been very expensive. Thank you so much. Don't mention it. It's nothing compared to the value of our boss's life. Laura promised to bring more high-grade essence stones if she found any. And now for the main topic. Laura's expression turned serious as she glanced at her subordinates gathered around. As if on cue, the Scavenger Guild employees left the office. From now on, everything is classified information that could have serious consequences if leaked. Copy that. Our guild members are all trustworthy. Understood. After all, Suho's guild members consisted only of Lim Do-gyun and Esil, and they weren't the type to carelessly spread secrets. In fact, Suho had to stop Lim Do-gyun, who was subtly trying to follow the scavenger employees out of fear. Do-gyun, you need to know what you need to know. No, I think it's okay if I don't. Lim Do-gyun was feeling anxious these days because the scale of Suho's activities was becoming increasingly unmanageable. But since he was in charge of most of the tasks except for combat, there was no way to escape. Esil, on the other hand, seemingly unconcerned, just sat next to Suho. He then plugged in the USB. Laura had handed him into the laptop, and it displayed the video files on the screen. Please watch this video. Asked Laura. Christopher Reed? The face that appeared on the screen was definitely Christopher Reed, the American S-rank hunter who had been killed by Thomas Andre. This is data we found during our recent investigation. It turns out he had been receiving regular psychiatric counseling since his awakening. As Laura explained, the video showed Christoph, or Reed, having a conversation with a therapist. I don't know why I feel so empty these days. I wonder if other awakened feel this way too. He had a very tired expression. Chris, the other awakened I've counseled, feel the opposite of you. They all seem elated and intoxicated by their newfound power. The therapist spoke with a puzzled look. Then why do I alone feel this way? People sometimes feel anxious when they experience a windfall that's too much for them to handle. You might feel better once you get used to your power. Are you saying it's because I became an S-rank hunter? Like suddenly winning the lottery? But, doctor, the emotions I'm feeling are a bit different from that. Christopher Reed continued to express his feelings with a serious expression. Laura showed Suho the videos of his counseling sessions in chronological order. Most of the conversations in those sessions were similar. Doctor, I'm still anxious. I think I've become too weak. Why do you think that way? Chris, you're an S-rank hunter. I don't know. I've clearly reached the pinnacle of hunters, but I feel weaker than before. I want to become stronger. Watching the videos, Suho exchanged a serious look with Laura. She nodded and said, That's right. The emotions he felt are exactly the same as what our boss was feeling until recently. Meanwhile, Christopher Reed's counseling videos continued to play in sequence on the screen, repeating the same pattern. Doctor, I want to become stronger. No, I feel like I can become stronger, but I just don't know how. Doctor, I've been thinking about it. Could it be that I have some tremendous hidden potential? Beyond S-rank? Doctor, but then, at some point, Christopher Reed's expression started to change, becoming confident. Doctor, I think I've found a way to become stronger. Chris, that's great news. But how? That's a secret I can't tell you, but I'm certain if I use the method they taught me, I'll definitely become stronger. Who are they? They. Suho also became curious. At the therapist's question, all expression vanished from his face in an instant. A chill ran down the spines of those watching the video. His eyes were like those of a soulless being. Christopher Reed, who had always received counseling with an empty and dejected expression, was now wearing a completely different look. Then, staring directly at the camera lens that had been recording the entire counseling session, he slowly curled his lips into a smile. I'm afraid I can't answer that. If I did, I might. Anyway, thank you for everything, doctor. Stopping the video, Laura provided further explanation. After that session, he never visited the therapist again. Instead, he bought a luxurious mansion and started throwing parties and living frivolously. It was common for hunters to indulge in sensual pleasures. It was a typical behavior of the newly rich, transcending gender and age, that had existed throughout history. But Laura, after thoroughly investigating Christopher Reed's seemingly normal behavior, discovered one strange fact. A significant number of people who were invited to his mansion went missing. Missing? You mean murder? Lim Do-gyun asked back with a frightened expression, but Laura shook her head slightly and replied, "Well, it would be considered murder, but the investigation revealed something different. A large quantity of stardust was found in Christopher Reed's mansion." Stardust? You mean the drug? Yes, that's right. It's a mana booster that's quite widespread in Korea as well. Hearing this unexpected story, Suho's gaze turned to Esil. Originally, Stardust was a mana booster developed by low-rank demons in an attempt to mimic Bloodstone, the exclusive ability of the demon nobles. Esil nodded with a hardened expression. It seems there are demons from our kind in that country as well. In a way, it was natural. Even at this moment, the demon realm was drifting through the dimensional gap, torn into several pieces, and on a globa, L scale, it was unlikely that the dimensional rifts connecting to those fragments were only happening in Korea. If this was the case, there was a high probability that demon factories existed all over the world, or in this case, in the United States. Demon factories. I know quite a bit about Stardust, but the reason our boss killed him is actually different. Laura opened the next file. It was an image showing the interior of Christopher Reed's extravagant mansion, now destroyed and gone thanks to Thomas Andre. A brave reporter who risked his life sneaking into the burning ruin took the photo. According to that reporter, Christopher Reed seemed to have fallen into a strange cult at some point. A cult? Suho asked back with a puzzled expression. Yes, and the very next day, that reporter suddenly disappeared from the face of the earth without a trace. We assume he's probably dead, but we recently discovered a phrase he left behind. Click. Laura turned to the next page, and the phrase he left behind appeared on the screen. Outer gods. In an instant, the eyes of everyone, including Suho, widened. The outer gods cult. Laura spoke with a heavy expression, looking at the words. It seems they call their religion by that name. Chapter 178. Chapter 177. Outer gods. There were countless gods with various names on Earth, but as far as Suho knew, there existed no deity called by such a name. Except for one. It seems the apostles of Itarim have begun their activities on Earth in earnest. Beru narrowed his eyes, glaring at the screen the name was displayed on. According to our investigation, Christopher Reed's mansion appears to have been used as a temple for the foreign religion cult. A temple? Does that mean there was another apostle of Itarim there? We don't believe so. It seems that the apostle of Itarim possessed only Christopher Reed's body. The rest were merely his followers. Suho suddenly noticed something strange in Laura's words. You said it seems? You're not certain? Yes. The others were all killed in the battle against our boss, so we couldn't confirm for sure. But the strange thing is, Christopher Reed seemed to grow stronger every time he killed one of his presumed followers. A situation similar to the Mad Tyrant. Esil, who had been listening quietly with her arms crossed, changed her expression. It seems our demons are being diligently bred somewhere, for a lot of different reasons. Esil Radiru, the sole demon noble, gritted her teeth with an indignant expression. The ones who made Stardust were demons, and its most important ingredient was also demon blood. In short, the foreign religion was thoroughly exploiting demons for their own purpose. And that was undoubtedly to find vessels that can accept the power of Itarim and turn them into their pawns. And the most suitable candidates would be those who were national-level hunters in their previous lives. Suho looked at Esil and Lim Do-gyun and said, Esil, did your subordinate demons hear anything about the Mad Tyrant? Nothing useful. They didn't even know he was an apostle of Itarim. But just in case, I'll go back and ask around again. Okay, I'll leave it to you. And Do-gyun. Yeah? Please look into dungeons with demon-type monsters for our guild's future raids. If we thoroughly search Korea, we should find something. Got it. Suho decided to eradicate all demon factories in Korea this time. If they did that, something would surely turn up, whether it was an apostle of Itarim or the foreign religion. Laura, do you have any other information about the foreign religion? Yes, we're still investigating, but they seem to be a secretive organization whose true nature is elusive. If they were just an ordinary cult, they'd have a large number of visible followers. Then, let's reverse the order. Reverse? Suho recalled the conversation Christopher Reed had with the therapist. If his words were true, they had approached him first. Then it was highly likely that they would approach others first as well. They might already be lurking nearby, waiting for an opportunity. If we linger near hunters likely to be targeted and keep an eye on them, wouldn't something turn up? That's certainly true, but the problem is that our scavenger guild is in no position to interfere in other countries' affairs. As Thomas Andre had told Suho directly, the scavenger guild had to lay low for the time being. But Suho had no intention of just waiting idly. I have another way. Are you planning to go yourself? No, I have someone else to send. He answered with a grin. Suho, thanks for the invitation. This is a housewarming gift. How did you get here so fast? I ran at full speed because Suho is my friend. Ryo Singh, a B-rank hunter from the Asura Guild, rushed to Woojin Guild's office as soon as he received Suho's call, with both hands full of gifts. He greeted Laura warmly and then talked about his recent situation. I'm currently in charge of purchasing weapons from Korean blacksmiths and sending them back to the guild. Ryo Singh, who had been demoted to Korea and failed to recruit Suho, had not given up and had seized a new opportunity for himself. Korean weapons are of exceptional quality. I heard the Korean Hun Terror Association is supporting them, which is truly amazing. His Korean had improved even further. But what did you call me for? Ryo Singh didn't think Suho would have called him for no reason. Moreover, with Laura from the Scavenger Guild also present, his instinctive business sense allowed him to guess Suho's purpose. Is it about the potion from the Echo Forest? Almost. Ryo Singh, we want to start selling the detox potion to the Asura Guild. Laura stepped forward and handed him a contract, formally proposing the business deal. After skimming through, he nodded with a bright expression. I'm definitely interested in such a good offer. But what's this requirement? The guild master has to try it personally? Yes, it's part of our promotional strategy. Our detox potion hasn't been widely publicized yet, so the fact that someone like the guild master of Asura Guild drank it personally would have a significant promotional effect. That certainly makes sense. Ryo Singh's eyes sparkled as he nodded at Laura's explanation. He had already been to the glacier dungeon with them, so he knew very well about the effectiveness of the spring water from the Echo Forest. This is a huge business opportunity. I'll definitely get promoted this time. You're not even hiding your true intentions anymore. Ha! Ryo Singh laughed heartily and then contacted the Asura Guild Master, successfully getting confirmation for the requirements, and he immediately signed all the contracts Suho and Laura presented. This business is extremely important, so I'll have to go to the guild myself. Ryo, while you're at it, could you do me a favor? What is it? You've entrusted me with such a big deal, so I'll do anything for you, Suho. Be careful of your guild master. Our guild master? Why? Ryo Singh looked puzzled at the strange words, but Suho's gaze was too serious to dismiss it as mere nonsense. Suho recalled the information he had heard from Beru. There were a total of 5 national-level hunters in the previous timeline. Excluding one healer, the names of the 4 who used the ruler's authority were as follows: Thomas Andre of the United States, Christopher Reed of the United States, Lu Jigang of China, Siddharth Bachchan of India. The first 2 had already been dealt with, leaving only 2 to check, and the one Suho focused on first was none other than the 4th. Siddharth Bachchan of India. He was the guild master of the Asura Guild. A mysterious organization called the Foreign Religion might have approached your guild master, Siddharth Bachchan. Foreign Religion? What's that? Remember what happened to Thomas Andre in the Glacier Dungeon? Having experienced that situation together, no further explanation was needed. Recalling the image of Thomas Andre transforming into a giant ice dragon and rampaging, Ryo Singh wore a troubled expression. Are you saying our guildmaster might end up like that too? Nothing is certain yet, so when you go back to the guild, could you check on him? Sure, but you should know that I respect our guildmaster a lot. Ryo Singh boasted confidently and took a large supply of the detox potion to give to Siddharth Bachchan. Meanwhile, Suho's gaze briefly glanced at his own shadow. Kira, follow him. Swoosh. His shadow lengthened, and the shadow assassin, Kira, slipped into Ryo Singh's shadow. Seeing this, Suho's eyes gleamed. It was an opportunity to utilize the new skill he had acquired after clearing the quest his father had given him. What? You found a dragon's egg? When Suho entered the shadow dungeon with Kamish's egg, the most surprised one was the queen bee, Arsha. Yeah. My mother found it in the tomb of the berserk dragons and sent it to me. Oh my god, it's real. Arsha felt a shiver as she looked at the egg in Suho's hand. Although it was too small to be a dragon's egg, the faint dragon energy emanating from it was real. That energy continuously stimulated Arsha's survival instincts. She looked at Kamish's egg with an sigh expression and asked, "Why? Did you bring such a dangerous thing here?" Suho shrugged and replied, "Of course I brought it because it's dangerous. It's safe here, isn't it? As my mother said, it will be more secure here than in the tomb of the berserk dragons or on Earth. Besides, even if something happens here, at worst." Growl. Suho's gaze shifted slightly to the side as he spoke. The giant crocodile monster Umut was there, baring his teeth with a ferocious grin. At worst, I can just eat it, right? This is definitely the perfect place. It was very reassuring. Suho nodded in satisfaction. But don't actually eat it. This egg might be the last remaining descendant of the dragon race. Beru also agreed with Suho's words and nodded. That's highly likely. The Dragon Emperor took all his dragons to war back then. He frowned, recalling the terrible war. Dragon Emperor, Antares, the monarch of destruction, the king of the dragons, was the only monarch who had ever overwhelmed the shadow monarch, Sung Jinwoo. He was the undisputed strongest of the dragon race, and the dragons he led were also an invincible army, each possessing immense power and magic. The Dragon Emperor was a true embodiment of destruction, willing to embrace even his own demise for the sake of war, a maelstrom of blood, screams, madness, and devastation. That's why Sung Jinwoo attacked his army even more relentlessly. Looking back, the monarch of destruction's power was even more astonishing. At the time, the shadow army led by Sung Jinwoo had already absorbed the forces of all the other monarchs. Yet the Dragon Emperor fought a fierce battle against that massive immortal army until the very last moment. Of course, Sung Jinwoo ultimately emerged victorious, but it was undeniable that the dragons were truly the strongest race. Although the rebirth of the Dragon Emperor's descendant is a bit unsettling, well, if we raise it as a pet from a young age, there shouldn't be any problems. Saying that, Suho looked at the wolf that had been clinging to his side. The fang wolf, gray, tamed through the pet system. Sniff, 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 sniff. Unlike Arsha, this guy was busy burying his nose in Kamish's egg and sniffing it with sparkling eyes. Lick, lick, lick. He even tasted it with his tongue. Meanwhile, his tail was wagging excitedly, making him quite an interesting thing to watch. It didn't seem like he actually wanted to eat it, but rather, he looked like he had found a fun new toy. For now, just in case, I'll build a nest here. Arsha started building a nest for Kamish's egg in a corner of Amut's pyramid, using her worker bees. Bzzz. Although it was called a nest, it was essentially a prison to confine the monster that could be hatched from it. Chapter 179. Chapter 178. Phew, this should be safe enough. Arsha completed the nest and let out a relieved sigh. Suho couldn't believe his eyes. Is this a nest or a bunker? Considering a dragon will hatch from this egg, this is actually not enough. Arsha was still wary of Kamish's egg. Dragons are apex predators from the moment they come into this world. Red dragon hatchlings in particular can breathe fire as soon as they're out of the egg. You wouldn't know being human, but dragons. Nonsense! Our little lord took to the skies as a babe. Arsha had no choice but to shut her mouth at Beru's outburst. Come to think of it, Suho here wasn't normal either. No, in a way, he could be considered the most menacing one here. Sigh. How did I end up living in such a dreadful place? Arsha bit her lip and sighed at the harsh reality she found herself in. Suho asked her, "You seem to know a lot about dragons?" Information gathering is my specialty. Indeed, her ability to create numerous doppelgangers was perfect for gathering information. In fact, even at this very moment, her worker bees were scouring the country in search of villains. Then do you happen to know how to hatch a dragon's egg? I've heard dragons periodically perform a baptism of mana to hatch their eggs. Baptism of mana? What's that? Simply put, it's a constant shower of mana. Come to think of it. This egg is too small to be a dragon's egg. It's probably because its parents died early, and it couldn't receive the mana baptism, so it didn't grow properly. Arsha's guess was spot on. Kamish's egg was the smallest one Cha Haein had found in the tomb of berserk dragons. Suho's expression hardened slightly at her words. You mean this egg might not hatch? I'm not sure about that. Baptism of mana. Suho pondered for a moment after hearing Arsha's explanation. Then wouldn't it work if someone other than the parents infused mana into the egg? There's no guarantee, but it would definitely help, wouldn't it? Then I can do it too. Excuse me? Suho just grinned and placed his palm on the surface of Kamish's egg inside the nest. Then he slowly drew up the mana within his body and began to gently push it into the egg. Whoosh! Oh my, how can a human? Arsha was once again amazed by his delicate mana control. Considering Suho was human, this was truly a remarkable ability. While using mana was as natural as breathing for magical beasts, humans had only been able to use it for a mere 2 years. And Suho had awakened even more recently. Ahem. Our little lord was a prodigy from infancy. He took his first steps with the ruler's authority. Beru puffed up his chest beside them. Arsha was used to Beru's doting, so she tried her best not to look at him and spoke to Suho with concern. Suho, I think you're doing it right, but even so, the effect will be minimal. Why is that? Suho asked, as he continued to infuse mana into Kamish's egg. Dragons are a race with an innate abundance of magic power. Because of that, the egg receives a tremendous amount of mana from its parents until it hatches. That's why the baptism of mana was also called a mana shower. Even if the egg couldn't absorb all that immense mana, it was continuously flooded with it. I know you're amazing, Suho, but even if you infuse mana into the egg until you're exhausted, it's a drop in the bucket compared to a dragon's mana. Gulp. Arsha felt something strange while she was speaking. For some reason, Suho's mana entering Kamish's egg showed no signs of depleting, and at some point, Suho had started drinking something continuously. Gulp. Gulp. Item, intermediate mana potion used. Item, intermediate mana potion used. Mana potion. I have enough mana. A confident smile appeared on Suho's face as he drank mana potions non-stop. It was confidence backed by evidence. His gaze was fixed on his status window, which was constantly fluctuating in real time. 7141 44 dropped the site. Even though I'm not a dragon, as long as I have gold, I can use mana all day long. This is unbelievable. Arsha was shocked and her jaw dropped at the sight. It was literally a mana shower. Suho's mana was endlessly pouring into Kamish's egg, giving it a baptism of mana. Kehet. Ahem. Our little lord. Beru puffed up his chest again, seizing the opportunity to boast. Suho himself was just sitting there, so why was Beru taking all the credit? Arsha wished someone would explain it to her. Anyway, watching Kamish's egg endlessly absorbing his mana, Suho nodded. All right, from now on, I need to focus on earning gold as well. If he wanted to use mana on the level of a dragon, the cost of potions would be substantial. Lim Do-gyun, a former university administrative assistant, found himself doing similar work even after becoming a hunter. The only difference was that the professor who used to give him difficult and demanding tasks had now been replaced by Sung Suho, his boss. Let's see. Lim Do-gyun took out his tablet PC, which he hadn't used since his days as a university assistant, and started writing in his work journal. The conditions Suho wants for the dungeons are scribble. 1. Dungeons that might hide demon factories, places where demon-type monsters appear, places with rumors about stardust or missing people. 2. Dungeons where we can earn a lot of gold. What's this? Places with lots of expensive materials? A brainstorming session ensued in Lim Do-gyun's head as he jotted down various ideas, and his eyes and ears were constantly searching for dungeons that met all those conditions, using every means possible. First, connections. Hello? Father, can you talk? If you're not busy, I have a few questions. He even called his father, with whom he still had an awkward relationship. Ah, hello? Is this Yu Jinho's secretary's office? CEO, Yu said, I could contact you if I needed anything. Yes, I need some information. He even called the secretary's office of the great and powerful Yu Jinho out of the blue. Ah, Vice President Baek Miho? This is Lim Do-gyun, the Vice President of Woojin Guild. I was wondering if you could share some information about dungeons. That's right. Lim Do-gyun was usually quite timid, but when it came to work, the former assistant was capable of anything, and he achieved the remarkable feat of finding dungeons that satisfied all of Suho's requirements in less than an hour. Suho, no boss. I've listed the dungeons I found and uploaded them. I've even prioritized them according to my own criteria, so you can just raid them in this order. Keek? What's this? Has this coward ever been this competent? Heh? Lim Do-gyun felt an immense sense of relief at Beru's surprised reaction. Riding this momentum, he boldly conveyed his request to Suho. So this time, I don't have to enter the dungeon, right? What are you talking about? Of course you have to go in. Lim Do-gyun's face fell in an instant. And so Suho's guild began raiding the dungeons Lim Do-gyun had found, one by one, targeting the demon factories. They had plenty of money. A massive sum from selling all the dungeon resources they had mined in Busan had just been deposited into the guild's account. Suho used that money to buy the dungeons Lim Do-gyun found without hesitation and started raiding them immediately. Having already worked together in Busan, the shadow soldiers led by Suho were demolishing the dungeons at a dazzling pace. Level up, level up. The leveling speed wasn't bad either. It was a good decision to create a guild. Acquiring dungeons is much easier than when I was a freelancer. He didn't just level up while raiding dungeons. He sold the expensive materials obtained from the defeated magical beasts in the shop window and earned gold. He needed the gold not only for potions, but also to buy defensive gear from the shop to increase his combat speed. Item, Superior Knight's Chest Piece. Late Acquisition Difficulty. Type, Armor. Physical damage reduction plus 7%. Movement speed decreases if strength is below 80. Item, Superior Knight's Helmet. Physical damage reduction plus 6%. Movement speed decreases if strength is below 80. He even bought items he had been coveting but couldn't afford due to his lack of strength. The more he increased his defense, the less he needed to spend on potions, and the faster he could fight. Somehow, it feels like I'm becoming a full-fledged tanker. Suho chuckled at his own fighting style. Leading the shadow soldiers, he looked every bit like a necromancer, but in reality, he was taking on the role of a tanker, fighting on the front lines even more than his summons. And then the shadow soldiers following behind him would clean up the remaining magical beasts. Should I call myself a necro-tanker? Suho chuckled and continued raiding dungeons. In the process, they even discovered an actual demon factory. However, it was an ordinary factory, so they couldn't obtain any information about the outer gods. Instead, they acquired the magic stones that were stored there as materials for stardust, which all went into Beru's stomach. And once again, Suho repeated the process of drinking potions and infusing mana into Kamisha's egg. Queen Bee Arsha spoke to Suho with a serious expression. It seems my worker bees have found something. Chapter 180, Chapter 179. Lately, Queen Bee Arsha had been under a lot of mental pressure, and the reason why was obvious. Her main body was already held hostage in the Shadow Dungeon, her life practically in Suho's hands. On top of that, he was the priest of Croatia, Queen of Insects and the Monarch of Plagues, so she had to stay on his good side. The problem was, no matter how hard she tried to please him, there wasn't much Arsha could actually be useful in. All she could do was gather information using her worker bees. And even that was becoming less impressive now that Lim Do-gyun, whom she had considered a useless human, was suddenly displaying incredible work efficiency. To think I have to compete with that human. Was there ever a more humiliating situation? For Arsha, who had treated Lim Do-gyun as someone of a lower status than a worker bee, this was quite unpleasant. But what could she do? She had to come up with something to stay in Suho's favor. Well, at the very least, she had to be more helpful than that human, who was at the bottom of the Woojin Guild. This won't do. I need to increase the number of worker bees as much as possible. She had never thought she lacked subordinates, but she decided to increase their numbers tenfold. If they're just worker bees without combat abilities, I can increase them as much as I want. Arsha had never increased her worker bees in this way before. To protect herself as the queen bee, quality was more important than quantity. But now that her main body was residing in the safe haven of the Shadow Dungeon, she decided to go for quantity over quality. And so, the number of worker bees under Arsha's control began to increase. The way she gained new subordinates was simple. She fed her royal jelly to ordinary worker bees living on Earth. What would be just a sip for a human could bring an entire hive under her control. And so Arsha's worker bees scattered all over the country. Until now, I only dealt with information about villains, but from now on, I'll select information about demon factories, stardust, and the foreign religion. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The worker bees busily flapped their wings and began gathering the information Arsha requested. But because she hadn't given them any special abilities, in order to increase their numbers, they weren't intelligent. So the queen bee herself had to receive and analyze the information they gathered. Ugh, my head. Arsha felt dizzy from the flood of information overwhelming her senses. But she didn't give up. Her pride as the queen bee wouldn't allow her to back down so easily. She desperately tried to cram and control the information sent by tens of thousands of worker bees into her mind. And then an unexpected phenomenon occurred. Suddenly, Arsha's consciousness, which had been controlling so many bees, burst and expanded. She collapsed on the spot, her whole body trembling. Crack! A transparent shell peeled off her body. Queen of insects and the monarch of plagues, observes the queen bee. Suho, who was in the middle of his daily quests, looked puzzled at the sudden message from Karesha. His limbs were crushed, and he couldn't even lift his head, but the messages continued. Queen of insects and the monarch of plagues remembers the name of Queen Bee Arsha. Remembers Arsha's name? This was the first time Karesha had directly mentioned Arsha's name. Karesha was the queen of all insects, while Arsha was just one of them, a subordinate she didn't even consider particularly valuable. But now, Karesha suddenly remembered Arsha's name? I don't know what's going on, but does this mean Arsha is more likely to become Karesha's successor? Suho stopped his thoughts at the sudden stern voice of Amped and retorted, 42! Your form is incorrect. 41. Ah! Suho gritted his teeth and resumed his push-ups at Amped's unwavering firmness, and by the time he barely finished his daily quest, Arsha appeared before him. Suho, it seems my worker bees have found something. Arsha relayed the information she discovered with a slightly serious expression. There seems to be a strange superstition spreading among low-rank hunters these days. Superstition? What do you mean? After the association classified stardust as an illegal drug, more and more hunters have been turning it into accessories and wearing it. Accessories? What does that mean? Suho looked puzzled, and Arsha continued her explanation seriously. They solidify stardust like a stone and make it into a necklace, and whenever they enter a dungeon, they pray to the necklace. Pray? Suho felt strange. Stardust wasn't illegal as long as it wasn't consumed, but why would they go through the trouble of making it into a necklace and even pray to it? It wouldn't amplify their mana or anything. If it's what I think it is, I might have seen it on HunterNet recently. Just then, Lim Do-gyun, who had fainted while training with Suho, woke up and crawled over to join the conversation. But he was able to sit up and continue his explanation only after receiving a healing potion. Stardust was recently classified as illegal, so people who had bought a large amount for a lot of money were in trouble. They were suddenly stuck with a lot of bad inventory, and the association had no obligation to compensate them for it. Moreover, now that people knew it was made by burning humans alive, no one wanted to consume it anymore. So, at some point, a trend started where people prayed to the necklace, saying they were comforting the souls of those who died in the horrific process of making stardust. And now, there are even people who buy up stardust, some stocked before it became illegal, make it into necklaces, and sell them. Doping with stardust is illegal, but this is a kind of clearance sale that started with a vaguely good intention. So, Suho's expression remained serious throughout Lim Do-gyun's explanation, commemorating the souls of the dead. The intention itself was good, but the problem was the object of their prayers. The most basic ingredient of stardust, the blue mist, was the Itarim's mana that dissolved the boundaries between dimensions. In other words, it was the main method of their invasion. And now people were praying to that blue mist? This feels ominous. I also mentioned it because I thought it might be related to the outer gods in some way. Suho nodded at Arsha's words. Looking back, there were no coincidences in matters like this, especially when it came to the Itarim. Arsha, the hunters praying to the necklaces, my worker bees have already identified them. No, I want you to find out who's selling the stardust necklaces to those hunters, not who the hunters themselves are. Ah. Arsha's eyes widened at Suho's words. Understood. I'll find out right away. Arsha quickly replied and sent a telepathic message to her worker bees spread across the country. A while later, I found them. Since she has already identified the hunters wearing the necklaces, it wasn't difficult to trace the route through which they acquired them. It wasn't even illegal, so nobody bothered to keep it a secret. But Arsha went a step further and investigated where the sellers were getting their necklaces from. There are many distributors, but they all get their stardust necklaces from one region. One region? Where is it? Yangpyeong, Gyeonggi Province. Yangpyeong? Arsha and even Beru, who was standing nearby, looked puzzled at Suho's intense reaction upon hearing the location. Little monarch, is there a problem? At Beru's question, Suho sighed with a grave expression, pressing his forehead. That's where my grandparents live. Sung Ilwan. In Suho's childhood memories, his grandfather always smelled of smoke, a firefighter through and through, and he never quit his job, even when his son, Sung Jinwoo, nagged him to retire and rest. He worked alongside his younger colleagues as long as he was able to. Suho till vividly remembered his grandfather's retirement ceremony. Senior, you've worked hard. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your service. His grandfather, stepping down from the podium after a long and dedicated career, received applause from all his colleagues and junior firefighters. Even on that day, the faint smell of smoke lingered on his uniform. After retiring from the job he had dedicated his life to, Suho's grandfather moved to the countryside with his grandmother, saying they would live a simple life focused on farming. Of course, it wasn't exactly the deep countryside. They hadn't left the Gyeonggi Province area. Yangpyeong was a place moderately distant, yet close enough to Seoul, with beautiful natural scenery like vast plains and valleys. It was none other than Yu Jinho who had provided Suho's grandparents with a comfortable house there. Of all places, it has to be where my grandparents live. The thought that there might be a group related to the outer gods in that area made Suho's heart race. But there was someone even more agitated than him. Beru. We have to go there immediately. This is a serious matter. Beru finally remembered something he had overlooked. How could I? Why did I only think of it now? This is entirely my fault. I deserve severe punishment, but there's no time for that now. What's wrong? Is there something I don't know? Suho rushed towards Yangpyeong where his grandfather lived. Beside him, Beru answered with a grave expression. We've always assumed that the apostles of Itarim would target high-ranking hunters with the potential to become vessels for their power, but it might not be just them. What do you mean? Your grandfather was also a hunter who received power from the rulers in his past life. At that moment, Suho ran towards Yangpyeong with all his might.